The story begins with a majestic voice echoing through the air, calling the name of Mumyeong, who lay prostrate on the ground. At first, he believed the voice had descended from the heavens, but belonged not to a divine being, but to the patriarch of the Cheon clan, Cheon Muryang, who stood before him with overwhelming authority. The patriarch declared that Mumyeong's life would serve one purpose: to protect this child. From the bottom of the broad stone steps, Mumyeong looked up at the towering figures above him and felt small, insignificant, and alone beneath their gaze. In that moment, his destiny was decided. Behind the patriarchs stood the young eldest master, Cheon Muryang, a trembling child hiding behind Cheon Muryang's robes with tears in his eyes. At the time, Mumyeong had no way of knowing that this frightened boy would one day become the disgrace that brought ruin to the Cheon clan. Even so, he lowered his head and accepted the order without hesitation. 15 years later, during a violent storm, the patriarch suddenly passed away. From that day onward, Cheon Muryang's corruption only deepened. The once glorious Cheon clan, one of the 10 great clans, collapsed almost instantly. Its members fled amid chaos and slaughter, but Mumyeong remained at Cheon Muryang's side. As his escort warrior, he devoted himself completely and continued fighting to protect him. Blood covered the battlefield, while Cheon Muryang hid behind him in fear. Yet there was no gratitude in his expression, only panic, because the person he trusted most had already led him into ruin. Then everything changed. A cold blade pierced through Mumyeong's back and emerged from his chest. The one holding the sword was Cheon Muryang. Shocked and unable to understand, Mumyeong realized that the person he had dedicated his life to protecting had betrayed him. Falling to his knees beneath the pouring rain, he could only wonder whether betrayal was the final reward for unwavering loyalty. Cheon Muryang stood trembling, his face filled with fear as red-robed assassins appeared around them. Barely alive, Mumyeong drove his sword into the ground to remain standing. Through strained breaths, he bitterly admitted that some people never change. Looking up, he saw Cheon Muryang watching silently while he bled before the newcomers. The assassins closed in without a word, their drawn weapons filling the air with murderous intent. Using the last of his strength, Mumyeong slowly pulled the sword from his chest and, filled with anger and disappointment, questioned whether Cheon Muryang truly believed sacrificing him would guarantee his own survival. As more shadowy figures emerged, Mumyeong mocked his own foolishness and wondered whether turning to the demonic cult could ever save Cheon Muryang or restore the Cheon clan. Rain poured even harder across the estate, and an ominous feeling settled over everything. With hatred burning in his eyes, Mumyeong accepted that he had been completely wrong about Cheon Muryang. At that moment, a bolt of lightning split the sky and illuminated the entire mansion. In the flash of white light, the members of the demonic cult revealed themselves in their distorted and unnatural forms. At their front stood a masked man. Behind him was a woman whose face appeared melted and reshaped beyond recognition. Beside her stood a giant wearing a bullhorn mask, carrying several blood-soaked heads across his shoulder as if they weighed nothing. The sight left Cheon Muryang frozen in terror. With his remaining breath, Mumyeong made him understand that if he truly wished to survive, bringing these monsters here had been his greatest mistake. At that moment, the bull-masked giant let out a beast-like roar and raised his enormous sword high into the air, preparing to strike. Cheon Muryang screamed in panic, but the terrifying blade never struck him directly. Instead, it came crashing down behind him and cut through his body in a single devastating blow. In an instant, the young master was split apart. Fresh blood mixed with the rain and turned the storm crimson. Watching this, Mumyeong thought bitterly that he should never have devoted his life to serving the young master. Using the last of his strength, he looked toward the empty sky and wondered whether Cheon Muryang was witnessing this from beyond. Only then did he understand that Cheon Muryang had never truly deserved his protection. The memory of the oath he had once made returned to him, and regret filled his heart for not abandoning that ruined path long ago. His fingers loosened. The sword slipped from his grasp and struck the cold ground. Mumyeong fell to his knees in the rain and blood before the broken remains of the person he had protected all his life. Soon after, his consciousness slowly faded into endless darkness. Even at the end, he felt there was no one left to blame. only regret remained. Long ago, he had been a nameless orphan wandering alone until the patriarch of the Cheon clan took him in and gave him the name Mong, meaning the nameless one. As he stared into the storm, one final wish formed in his heart. If he were given another life, he wanted nothing more than a true name and a life untouched by this tragedy before the demonic cult consumed everything. And so, the nameless one died. His body disappeared into nothingness. Death felt cold, like sinking into an endless frozen sea. His awareness drifted deeper into the darkness until a gentle warmth suddenly touched his foot and pulled him back. Slowly opening his eyes, Mumyeong felt unfamiliar warmth around him. A maid was carefully washing his feet with warm water. But something felt wrong. His body felt unusually heavy. Startled, he jumped to his feet, and the maid fell backward in shock. Still dazed, he looked around the unfamiliar room and questioned whether he had somehow survived. His final memory remained clear, the countless blades of the demonic cult piercing his body. The maid quickly lowered her head and apologized for allowing the water to cool. At that moment, he recognized her. It was Wolyang, the personal maid who had served the eldest young master since childhood. In his previous life, he had watched her suffer repeated abuse at the hands of Cheon Muryang. Seeing her trembling and apologizing once again, he awkwardly asked what mistake she believed she had made and why she kept calling him young master. But he quickly dismissed the thought. The only thing that mattered now was finding the real Cheon Muryang. Wolyang looked up in confusion and explained that he himself was the young master. Hearing those words, Mumyeong froze inside the unfamiliar, overweight body. He touched his swollen face in disbelief. Panicking, he searched for something reflective while Wolyang stepped back in alarm. Then he looked into the basin. The reflection staring back at him belonged unmistakably to Cheon Muryang. Despair settled over him. Under the quiet moonlight, he realized this was not a dream. Not only had he returned to life, but he had gone back 15 years and awakened inside the body of the very person who had betrayed him. Sitting silently on the bed, he tried to organize his thoughts. He asked Wolyang whether anyone in the clan was named Mumyeong. She answered that she had never heard that name before. The truth became clear. He had become Cheon Muryang, and because of that, the escort warrior Mumyeong no longer existed in this timeline. When he finally opened the window, a small sense of hope appeared. He still had 15 years before disaster arrived. This time, he could change everything and protect the clan with his own hands. Setting aside his shock, Mumyeong began observing his surroundings more carefully. But one question immediately came to mind. Why was the room of the eldest young master so plain? The chamber looked no different from that of an ordinary disciple. Then his eyes landed on a sword resting on a nearby shelf. A faint blue radiance surrounded it. At once, a painful memory returned. This was the same blade Cheon Muryang had used to stab him in the back. To his surprise, he recognized it as the celestial light sword. According to legend, it had been forged from a single ray of light that cut through darkness and was passed down only to the eldest young master of the Cheon clan, which meant the sword now belonged to him. Mumyeong slowly drew the blade. Its polished surface reflected his face while a bright aura spread quietly through the room. A small smile appeared on his face as he realized this weapon was on an entirely different level. Wanting to test it, he took a stance and attempted a simple strike. But the heavy and bloated body refused to respond properly. He lost balance almost immediately. After only a few movements, he was already gasping for breath and struggling to stand. Heat rushed to his face. Nausea followed. His legs trembled uncontrollably. Eventually, he dropped to his knees and steadied himself against the cold floor. The treasured sword slipped from his hand and fell beside him. Mumyeong stared at it in disbelief. He could not understand how a few simple swings had left his body completely exhausted. Under the pale moonlight, he realized the road ahead would be far more difficult than he had expected. He sat down and entered meditation to understand the source of the body's weakness. Although Cheon Muryang had never trained seriously in martial arts, his condition still felt abnormal. Normally, internal energy gathers in the dantian and flows naturally through the meridians. But inside this body, a massive amount of energy was trapped in the dantian and unable to circulate. Even worse, the unstable energy currents were colliding and gradually damaging both the meridians and the dantian. Then realization struck him. This was the result of excessive consumption of elixirs, a common mistake among spoiled noble children. People mocked this condition as the deviation of the golden spoon. Meanwhile, the training grounds of the Cheon clan echoed with the sounds of martial practice. Young disciples moved their one-in swords repeatedly, their blades cutting through the air. Suddenly, one powerful strike landed directly on an apprentice's head and left him staggering. The apprentice angrily demanded to know who had attacked so seriously during training. His opponent simply smiled and reminded him that he had claimed he could win with only one hand. Then he demanded the money from their bet. Holding his aching head, the apprentice argued that the match should not count. But the argument stopped when someone appeared at the edge of the field. The disciples froze. The eldest young master had arrived. Whispers spread immediately as they questioned why the useless young master had come to the training grounds for the first time. At that moment, Mumyeong, who was now Cheon Muryang, was already struggling to breathe. Even holding a simple wooden sword felt unbearably difficult. One apprentice mocked him and suggested he give up and leave since nobody wanted him there. After thinking for a moment, Muryang reached a conclusion. Sword training was impossible in this condition. His first goal would not be martial arts. He needed to run and lose weight. The unexpected decision left the disciples staring in complete confusion. Ignoring the confused stares around him, Cheon Muryang began running around the training grounds. Each step made his heavy body shake violently. The apprentices watched with open disdain as he moved across the field. The arrogant disciple from earlier laughed and remarked that the young master apparently had no intention of leaving. With a cruel smile, he decided to make him leave by force. Without hesitation, he rushed forward. Meanwhile, Cheon continued running, struggling for breath and unaware that trouble was approaching behind him. With every step, his condition worsened. Only then did he fully understand how damaged this body truly was. The countless elixirs consumed since childhood had never been properly absorbed. Instead, their energies had collided inside the body and gradually turned into poison, damaging him from within. Cheon clicked his tongue at the recklessness of the body's former owner and resolved to restore it until it could absorb spiritual energy normally again. Then suddenly, a sharp killing intent emerged behind him. Before he could react, an invisible palm force struck his abdomen and forced him to stumble. Almost at the same moment, a real sword shot through the air and embedded itself into a wooden pillar beside him. Cheon stopped immediately, his eyes fixed on the trembling blade. He could hardly believe someone had attacked him using a real weapon. The disciple approached with a false smile and casually claimed that the sword had slipped during training. Behind him, the others laughed and mocked the young master openly. Their leader looked at him with clear contempt and warned him that the training grounds were dangerous, suggesting that he return to his room and hide as usual. Cheon watched them quietly. Only then did he realize this was how the original Cheon Muryang had always been treated within his own clan. The bully clearly believed that a few threats would be enough to scare away someone who relied only on status. Unexpectedly, Cheon Muryang simply let out a small laugh. He scratched his head, thanked them for their concern, said he would be more careful, and continued running. The entire group stood frozen in confusion. Their leader eventually burst into laughter, collected the bet money from the earlier match, and mocked the stubborn young master while leaving with the others to drink. But behind the smile, resentment remained. Meanwhile, Cheon Muryang kept running. He disliked seeing warriors ridicule their own young master, but he forced himself to remain patient. His body was too weak. Fighting now would only end in defeat. His true objective was elsewhere. In his previous life, he had always wanted access to the secret martial arts of the Cheon clan, and those techniques should be stored inside the Celestial Dragon Library. As the eldest young master, entering the library should have been simple. After a long and exhausting run, he finally arrived at the place he had wanted to reach. But his expectation collapsed instantly. The guard standing at the entrance delivered words that left him speechless. Sweat formed across his forehead as he asked the guard to repeat himself. The guard sighed and firmly explained once more. The eldest young master, Cheon Muryang, had been stripped of his qualification to enter the Celestial Dragon Library. Not only that, he had also lost his right of succession. Cheon Muryang stood frozen in place as the meaning of those words slowly settled in. The guard firmly repeated that entry into the Celestial Dragon Library was strictly forbidden. With no room to argue, Cheon Muryang remained standing at the foot of the stone steps before finally turning back. Step by step, he returned to his room. The moment he arrived, he dropped onto the bed, overwhelmed by exhaustion and disappointment. Sitting silently, he realized that his attempt to change destiny had already met an obstacle. Now the condition of the room finally made sense. Cheon Muryang had already lost his position as the young patriarch. His original plan, to find a method inside the library to quickly absorb the accumulated elixir energy, had collapsed completely. He would need another solution. As he reflected, he began to see that the original Cheon Muryang's childhood had not been easy either. His body had been ruined by excessive elixirs. Enemies surrounded him. Even the people serving him looked down on him. In some ways, Cheon Muryang had been just as isolated as Mumyeong once was. Perhaps that was why he never trusted anyone, not even his own escort warrior. But Mumyeong quickly stopped himself. There was no reason to excuse Cheon Muryang. No matter the circumstances, he had still brought the demonic cult into the clan and led the Cheon clan toward destruction. His loneliness did not erase that. Mumyeong himself had also lived in isolation before, but by choice, devoting everything to martial training. At that moment, a faint smell reached him. Turning his head, he noticed a meal tray left nearby. He realized it must have been prepared by Wolyang, but the dish contained only mushrooms. Quietly, he thought there should at least be some meat. The meal felt far too plain. As he ate the tasteless food, another question appeared. How had Cheon Muryang become so overweight eating meals like this? Then suddenly, he remembered something. There was still one person left. A small sense of hope appeared. Cheon Muryang still had a single ally. The next morning, he started the day with renewed determination. He began with simple stretches. Even that left him breathing heavily. He could hardly believe a body could become exhausted from something so basic. Just then, Wolyang entered and looked surprised to find him awake so early. Seeing him preparing again, she quietly wondered whether he intended to continue training. Cheon Muryang gave only an awkward response. As she prepared to leave, she gently placed a garment over his shoulders. It was a small gesture, but careful and thoughtful. Cheon Muryang called out and asked about the clothes. Thinking he meant laundry, Wolyang immediately became flustered and apologized, explaining that she had accidentally fallen asleep while waiting for him. Watching her reaction, he thought that even if she did not seem especially capable, she was still the only ally he had. He stepped closer. Wolyang jumped in surprise. Then he quietly placed a hand on her shoulder and thanked her. The unexpected reaction left her completely confused. Unable to understand his meaning, she simply stood there. Cheon smiled awkwardly, apologized, and casually asked her to work a little harder because there would be much more laundry from now on. Then he turned and resumed training. Wolyang remained standing with the clothes in her arms, watching silently as he left. And so his training continued. From day into night, beneath the moonlight, Cheon kept running. Every step was difficult. His body strained under its own weight. His breathing became uneven. Sweat soaked his face and clothes. With each lap, he felt closer to his limit. But he continued moving forward. But then, a memory suddenly surfaced. It came from the harsh days of Mumyeong's training in his previous life. Back then, his master had scolded him for losing focus and demanded to know what he thought he was striking if his mind was elsewhere. Calling him ungrateful and accusing him of caring more about festivals than training, the master punished him by ordering him to perform the movement known as Know Your Place 100 times. The younger Mumyeong had simply accepted the order and answered firmly. Beside the wooden training dummy, a girl complained that he was moving too slowly. At the same time, the young Cheon had been excitedly pulling the patriarch around to watch lantern festivals, acrobatic performances, and fireworks. Thinking back on those memories, Mumyeong wondered whether he had ever truly chosen anything for himself. But the answer came quickly. He had never really had a choice. He had picked up the sword only to repay the kindness of the patriarch who had given a nameless orphan a place to belong. Yet now, despite his exhausted body, a quiet smile appeared on his face. For the first time, this difficult training gave him genuine satisfaction. Under the moonlight, he kept running, not for duty, but toward a goal he had chosen himself. From a distance, Wolyang silently watched his unsteady figure. Concern filled her eyes. Then suddenly, she saw him collapse. She hurried forward to support him, and to Muryang's surprise, she was much stronger than she appeared. The next day, rain covered the training grounds. Even so, Muryang continued running. The usual group of troublemakers gathered again. One disciple clicked his tongue in annoyance, irritated that the stubborn young master had returned once more. Others stretched out their hands to collect bet money. One of them laughed and mocked Nungryo for losing again, since he always bet that the young master would not show up. Nungryo complained loudly, unable to understand why Cheon Muryang kept returning. Then he openly mocked the young master's behavior and called it irritating. Another disciple warned him to lower his voice, but Nungryo only grew louder. According to him, it did not matter whether the young master heard because Cheon Muryang had already lost his position and been removed from his proper residence. He even argued that even if Cheon Muryang became patriarch someday, he would hold no real authority. When someone asked why, Nungryo explained that the Council of Elders held the true power and that even Commander Cheon Seonhak would never follow the young master's orders. From his perspective, disciples only had two sides to choose from, the Council of Elders or Commander Cheon Seonhak. Because of that, he believed Cheon Muryang could do nothing to them. The others eventually calmed him down. After collecting the bets, the group dispersed while joking about earning money thanks to the young master. But Nungryo remained. He stood in the rain and watched Cheon Muryang continue running. A suspicious thought formed in his mind. Perhaps the young master was pretending to change so he could regain his position. At that moment, Cheon Muryang suddenly stopped and turned toward him. Nungryo looked back with contempt, assuming he had heard everything. Nearby, Wolyang stood quietly in the rain. Holding folded clothes in her arms, she faced Nungryo directly. Her expression remained calm and unexpectedly firm. There was no fear. Then, as if responding to that quiet determination, sunlight finally broke through the clouds. A new day began. At the training grounds, practice swords were lined up neatly. Cheon Muryang stepped forward and selected one. He gripped it firmly. His eyes focused ahead. Then he began training and executed a clean and controlled sword movement. A faint current of energy gathered around the blade as Cheon Muryang began practicing sword forms. A small smile appeared on his face. This was progress. After days of running, he finally had enough stamina to hold and move the sword properly. If he combined endurance training with sword practice, the elixir energy trapped inside his body should absorb more efficiently. But suddenly, an angry voice broke the silence. Someone demanded that certain words be taken back. An arrogant disciple turned around and shouted, asking how a mere servant dared to speak that way. From a distance, Cheon Muryang noticed Nungryo and several others surrounding someone. It was Wolyang. She stood her ground and demanded that they stop insulting the young master. Cheon Muryang paused in surprise. Nungryo stepped forward and grabbed her by the collar. Anger twisted across his face as he demanded that she repeat what she had just said. Without hesitation, Wolyang repeated herself and insisted once more that he withdraw his insult. The surrounding disciples began whispering. From what they understood, Nungryo had openly insulted the young master, and the maid had overheard him. Not wanting involvement, many quietly left. That only made Nungryo more furious. His eyes sharpened as he questioned how a servant could act so boldly. But Wolyang did not back away. She kept looking directly at him. Humiliated and angry, Nungryo slowly drew his sword. His hostility spread through the training field. He pressed the blade against her neck as if testing whether she would still remain fearless. But before he could act, another sword cut across. His attack was redirected instantly, and he stumbled backward in shock. After regaining his balance, he finally saw who had stepped in. Standing in front of Wolyang was the eldest young master. Cheon pointed his sword directly at Nungryo and calmly demanded to know what he thought he was doing. His usual hesitation was gone. His gaze was steady, sharp, and unexpectedly commanding. The pressure alone made Nungryo falter. Cheon Muryang ordered him to draw his sword properly. Cold sweat formed on Nungryo's forehead as he tried to understand what was happening. Then Cheon Muryang stated that if Nungryo had something to say to Wolyang, he could say it through his blade. Nungryo hesitated and asked whether this meant the young master was challenging him. Cheon Muryang repeated the word duel as if considering it. then calmly raised the stakes and suggested treating it as a fight to the death. He laid out the conditions. If he won, he would not pursue punishment for the incident, and Nungryo would never return to the training grounds. Behind him, Wolyang panicked. She knew he had barely held a sword for over a month. Suddenly, Cheon slammed a wooden practice sword into the ground. Wolyang was shocked. Cheon Muryang spoke quietly but firmly. Insults directed at him did not matter. But insults toward people who cared for him would not be tolerated. That was his principle. Then he raised his sword again and ordered Nungryo to prepare. Still uncertain, Nungryo asked whether he truly intended to keep his word. Cheon Muryang answered immediately. He never broke his promises. Internally, Nungryo laughed to himself. He had not expected the young master to act this way, but none of it mattered as long as he won. Certain of victory, he silently dismissed Cheon Muryang as nothing more than a lazy and useless fool. But then, a powerful aura suddenly erupted from Cheon Muryang. The sword in his hand released a brilliant glow. Nungryo instinctively stepped back. He could not believe such pressure was coming from the young master. Cheon Muryang tightened his grip and calmly questioned whether Nungryo was afraid. When no response came, he warned that if his opponent would not attack, then he would move first. In the next instant, he surged forward. His sword cut horizontally with unexpected force. Caught off guard, Nungryo still reacted in time. Confident again, he mocked the attack and thought the speed was lacking. With that level of skill, he could not understand how someone would challenge him to a duel with such conditions. Then their swords met. A flash of light burst from the collision. The sound of metal echoed across the training grounds. And in a single exchange, Nungryo's sword was thrown from his hand. The blade spun through the air and embedded itself into the ground directly in front of him. The duel ended immediately. Nungryo remained frozen. Only after several moments did he understand. Cheon Muryang had never aimed for him. From the beginning, his target had been the sword. Using the force of the clash itself, he had disarmed him perfectly. Staring in disbelief, Nungryo questioned whether such a technique truly belonged to the Kine clan and wondered when the young master had become capable of this. Cheon Muryang looked at him coldly. He reminded him that this had been declared a fight to the death. Yet Nungryo had swung carelessly without understanding his opponent. Then he asked whether this was truly how a disciple of the Kine clan should fight. Unable to answer, Nungryo slowly dropped to his knees. Cheon Muryang looked at him and called the display disappointing. Resting the sword on his shoulder, he stated that Nungryo was not yet worthy of carrying a blade. Blood quietly ran down Cheon Muryang's hand from the strain of using a technique beyond what his current body could endure. He ignored it. Instead, he told Nungryo to think about why a person chooses to wield a sword. When he found the answer, he could return and challenge for the blade again. Nungryo remained kneeling in silence. For the first time, he seriously considered the meaning behind those words. Meanwhile, Cheon Muryang turned and called for Wolyang to return with him. Behind them, the remaining disciples stood speechless. Nungryo slowly reached into empty space, as if trying to hold on to something that had disappeared. After a moment, he lowered his hand and bowed his head. As Cheon Muryang and Wolyang walked back to their quarters, whispers spread among the disciples. Once they arrived, Wolyang immediately lowered her head and apologized repeatedly. She blamed herself for interfering and admitted that hearing others mock his efforts had made her act emotionally. She also blamed herself for his injured hand and wished she had remained calmer. Cheon Muryang looked at the wound and explained that the injury came from forcing a technique his body could not fully handle. Then he told her there was no reason to apologize for defending him. Wolyang slowly looked up in surprise. Cheon Muryang smiled lightly and repeated the principle he had already shown. Insults aimed at him did not matter, but insults directed at people who cared for him would never be ignored. To protect those people, he would not hesitate, regardless of who stood in front of him. Wolyang looked at him in silence. Her eyes widened with surprise and admiration as the moment slowly settled in. Then an old memory returned. Years ago, during a festival night, the young Cheon Muryang had once shared his New Year's wish. Back then, he had said that he wanted to become truly strong like the great elephant standing before them, so that one day he could become a patriarch capable of protecting everyone. With complete confidence, he had promised to begin sword training from the very next day. He had even laughed and said that even if Wolyang grew taller than him, he would still protect her. A tear quietly slipped down her cheek. She wiped it away and thought that this was the young master she remembered, the one she once knew, the one who had finally returned. But suddenly, Cheon Muryang's expression became serious. He asked whether someone could truly take responsibility for those words. Wolyang became confused. Then she realized he was not speaking to her. Someone had appeared behind them. It was Cheon Seonhak, Cheon's uncle and one of the 3 pillars supporting the Kind clan. He also commanded both the Heavenly Dragon Sword Unit and the Heavenly Phoenix Sword Unit. His expression remained cold as he repeated the question and demanded to know whether Cheon Muryang could truly stand behind such words. Cheon lowered his head respectfully. He greeted him, called him uncle, and apologized for not visiting properly. Inside, however, he felt something different. In his previous life, this had been the commander he trusted and followed most. He never expected to meet him again under these circumstances. Cheon Seonhak dismissed the greeting and demanded a direct answer. Cheon gave a faint smile. Some things had not changed. Even after 15 years, his uncle still viewed the young master as a disappointment. Lifting his head, Cheon answered clearly. As the young master of the clan, he believed protecting his people was his responsibility, and there was no reason to avoid that duty. That principle remained unchanged. The answer made Cheon Seonhak narrow his eyes. With visible suspicion, he remarked that such noble words did not suit the mouth speaking them. Then his attention shifted. He recognized the technique Cheon had used earlier, the dragon claw of the Heavenly Dragon Sword Art. His expression cooled immediately. That technique belonged exclusively to the Heavenly Dragon Sword Unit. If Cheon knew it, someone must have taught him illegally. And if someone had risked doing that, they must be someone close to him. Cheon Seonhak declared that he would find the traitor and punish not only that person, but everyone who protected them. Then he challenged Cheon Muryang to protect them if he truly believed in his own words. If he failed, he would bear responsibility and lose access to the training grounds permanently. The intention was obvious. This was also a convenient opportunity to remove the troublesome young master. Cheon pressed his lips together, carefully choosing his words. He finally answered. The traitor was no one. Both Wolyang and Cheon Seonhak stared at him in confusion. Inwardly, Cheon Muryang remembered the truth. In his previous life, the person who taught him that technique had been Cheon Seonhak himself. But aloud, he simply explained that he had once seen the Dragon Claw technique and reproduced it through observation. For a moment, Cheon Seonhak burst into laughter. The sound echoed across the training grounds. To him, the explanation sounded absurd, but the laughter ended as quickly as it began. His expression became cold. His hand slowly moved to the hilt of his sword. Then, without warning, Cheon Seonhak leapt into the air. According to him, this was not a sword technique someone like Cheon Muryang could reproduce simply by seeing it once. He ordered him to draw his sword and declared that he would question the blade directly. Cold sweat formed across Cheon Muryang's face. Even so, he raised his sword and took a defensive stance. Cheon Seonhak released an immense surge of internal energy. A blazing aura surrounded him like burning fire. Despite the pressure, Cheon Muryang remained calm. He repeated that he had already spoken honestly. Then he proposed something unexpected. If Cheon Seonhak did not believe him, he could demonstrate another sword art, one Cheon Muryang had never seen before, and he would attempt to imitate that as well. For a brief moment, Cheon Seonhak said nothing. Blood continued to drip from Cheon Muryang's injured hand as he tightened his grip. But Cheon Seonhak dismissed the explanation. In his eyes, the young master was still lying to protect himself, and he no longer trusted his words. Ignoring Cheon Muryang, he turned sharply toward Wolyang. She flinched and immediately responded. Cheon Seonhak demanded to know what the young master she served had truly been planning. His gaze remained cold as he warned that if she lied even once, he would not hesitate to punish her. Wolyang turned pale. Sweat formed across her face. Her hands trembled and her body stiffened with fear. Still, she answered. She explained that over the past month, the young master had been smiling. It was a smile she had not seen in a long time. Cheon Seonhak paused. He found it difficult to believe. He questioned whether the same person who had always lived with inferiority, anger, and resentment had really changed. Wolyang confirmed it. Though still nervous, she explained that while Cheon Muryang trained and ran around the field every day, she had seen something different. His smile had looked genuine. Cheon Muryang turned slightly. Only then did he realize she had been quietly watching all along. Inside, he reflected that he had only been smiling because for the first time in his life, he was working towards something for himself. Woleong continued. Even when others mocked and insulted him, he ignored them. The old young master would have become angry or avoided them completely. But this time was different. For the first time, he had drawn his sword to protect someone else. She finished by saying that the young master had truly changed and that she believed in him. Cheon Muryang fell silent. His expression revealed nothing. He seemed to be measuring whether this change was real. After some time, he finally spoke. He asked what martial arts Cheon Muryang knew. Cheon Muryang answered that he only practiced the heavenly young divine art and was no different from the other disciples. Cheon Muryang raised 2 fingers. Then he set a condition. He would give Cheon Muryang 2 months. Within that time, he had to defeat the top disciple. If he succeeded, Cheon Muryang said he would attempt to believe him. Looking directly into his eyes, he asked whether he could do it. Cheon Muryang stayed quiet for a moment. Inwardly, he remembered that the commander had always tested people this way. Then a confident smile appeared. Calmly, he replied that 1 month would be enough. The answer caught Cheon Muryang off guard. He remained silent with one hand resting on his sword. After a long pause, he accepted the promise. Without saying anything else, Cheon Muryang turned and walked away. Cheon Muryang watched him leave with a calm and confident expression, as though everything was moving according to plan. Then he turned to Woleong and invited her to return with him. She looked surprised, but instead of resting, Cheon Muryang said he still needed to run a little more. His eyes followed Cheon Muryang's retreating figure in the distance. Then the two quietly continued along their chosen path. Woleong answered brightly and followed behind him. 15 days later, Cheon Muryang stood with his sword. His body had become noticeably slimmer and stronger. With one swift movement, he released a fast slash and sharp sword energy cut through the air. During those 15 days, he had reached the 5th stage of the heavenly young divine art and dissolved most of the chaotic energy trapped inside his body. Only the remaining Yin energy still resisted him. Quietly, he thought that if he had been allowed access to a higher cultivation method from the Celestial Dragon Library, his progress would have been even faster. His eyes briefly moved to the healed wound on his hand. He wished the damage inside his meridians could recover just as naturally. Meanwhile, voices gathered around the training grounds. Someone spoke with envy, mocking the fortunate disciple who would get the chance to publicly defeat the young master. Others agreed and whispered that the outcome was obvious. After all, Cheon Muryang had done nothing but practice simple downward slashes day and night. Cheon Muryang guessed that spreading such rumors had probably been Cheon Muryang's intention, to pressure him and make him give up. Then suddenly, something felt wrong. Nearby, an apprentice relaxing carelessly on a chair made another mocking remark and questioned whether the young master even knew the difference between swordsmanship and farm work. In an instant, Cheon Muryang stood in front of him. Calmly, he asked whether they were discussing something interesting. Then he looked directly at the man and asked if he was the top disciple. The apprentice looked surprised. A strange tattoo marked his forehead. With complete confidence, he admitted that he was. He casually told Cheon Muryang not to worry about the duel and promised to finish it mercifully. But Cheon Muryang continued staring. Something about him felt familiar. He asked for his name. The disciple answered confidently, Lee Suki. The moment Cheon Muryang heard it, he froze. The memory returned immediately. In his previous life, this was the person who leaked the secrets of the Cheon clan to the demonic cult. A wave of anger rose inside him. He quietly repeated the name and declared that he would remember it. Then he turned away. Originally, he had planned only to do his best regardless of the opponent. Now that had changed, his eyes hardened. Silently, he promised himself that he would not overlook this traitor. 15 days later, the day of the duel finally arrived. The training grounds of the Cheon clan were packed with spectators. People whispered and wondered how badly the young master would lose. Still, some noticed that something about him seemed different. Then a loud order for silence spread across the arena. The referee officially announced the beginning of the match. He He explained that the duel had been arranged personally by Commander Cheon Seon-hak. From above, Cheon Seon-hak signaled for the names of the participants to be called. The referee stepped forward and announced Lee OK first. With complete confidence, Lee Suki entered the stage. His expression carried certainty as he casually swung his wooden weapon. Victory already seemed guaranteed in his mind. Then the referee called for Cheon Muryang. Silence followed. The referee looked around in confusion. Whispers spread. Some wondered if the young master had fled. Quiet laughter quickly turned into open mockery as several disciples joked that this was exactly what they expected from someone they considered cowardly and useless. Lee smiled with open contempt. Above them, Cheon Seon-hak watched in silence, his expression impossible to read. But at that moment, a clear voice echoed across the arena. Cheon Muryang had arrived. The entire crowd froze. Even Cheon Seon-hak could not completely hide his surprise. Everyone turned toward the entrance of the training grounds. Slowly, a tall and noticeably leaner young man walked forward with an entirely different presence. The spectators stared in disbelief. Whispers spread immediately. People questioned where the overweight young master had gone and who this person was. Then someone recognized him. Shock spread through the arena. It truly was the young master, Cheon Muryang. Silence followed. No one could understand how he had changed so much in such a short time. Cheon raised his head calmly and looked directly toward Cheon Seon-hak, seated above. He bowed respectfully and apologized for arriving late. Cheon Seon-hak dismissed the formalities and asked only whether he was prepared. Cheon answered confidently that he was. Then, to everyone's surprise, he tossed aside his wooden sword and firmly planted his staff into the sand. Standing opposite him, Lee frowned. The change in appearance irritated him. He wondered whether losing weight had made the young master overconfident. To him, someone who had trained for only a month should not even consider standing against him. Still, he quickly pushed those thoughts aside. Today, not only was Cheon Seon-hak present, but commanders from both the Heavenly Dragon Sword Unit and Heavenly Phoenix Sword Unit were watching. Lee intended to use this opportunity to leave a strong impression. Cheon watched him quietly. He could already see what was happening. Lee was not focused on the match. He was thinking about recognition and advancement. Inwardly, Cheon looked at him with cold clarity. Lee had always been this kind of person, not someone who rose through swordsmanship, but through manipulation and ambition. In his previous life, after entering the Heavenly Dragon Sword Unit, Lee had gained influence through politics rather than ability. Eventually, blinded by greed, he betrayed the Cheon clan and passed information to the demonic cult. By the time Mumyeong had realized the truth, it had already become irreversible. This time will be different. Lee had not committed those crimes yet. That was exactly why Cheon intended to stop him before that path began. Quietly, he thought that everything had probably gone according to Lee's plans until now. That was likely how he had become the top disciple. But circumstances had changed. The referee stepped forward and announced the rules. The match would continue until stopped. This was not a fight to the death. Cheon looked directly at Lee. Calmly, he stated that he understood him better than anyone and that this would be the end of his rise. Then he took his stance. Lee prepared himself as well. The moment Cheon Seon-hak gave the signal, Cheon moved first. He launched a surprisingly fast opening strike with his wooden staff. Lee dodged easily and countered immediately. Driving his staff into the ground for momentum, he leapt high and delivered a heavy downward strike. Confidently, he recalled hearing about how Cheon had defeated Nungryo by attacking first and using an unusual technique to disarm him. Thinking that strategy would not work again, he altered the trajectory of his attack and gripped the staff with both hands. He intended to overpower him directly. Their wooden weapons collided. Sharp cracking sounds spread across the arena. Yet Lee remained completely stable. He blocked the attack without yielding. Cheon hesitated. The strength behind the defense was greater than expected. Grinding his teeth, he pushed harder, determined to crush him through force. But Lee only gave a faint smile. Suddenly, Lee changed his movement. Leaning smoothly to the side, he avoided Cheon's attack with precise timing. A moment later, both rushed forward again. Their staffs cut through the air and collided repeatedly. Cheon tightened his grip and remained focused as the exchange intensified. He reinforced his defense and then rotated into an unexpected counterattack. Lee smirked. At first, he had planned to hold back out of consideration for the young master. but now he no longer saw any reason to do so. With the commanders watching, he believed he could not afford to miss this opportunity. If Cheon suffered because of it, then so be it. Then, Cheon Muryang's wooden sword shattered under the force of Lee's strike. Without hesitation, Lee rushed forward. He unleashed a rapid sequence of attacks and finished by driving a powerful kick into Cheon Muryang's side. The impact forced him backward. For a brief moment, however, Lee noticed something strange. There was less resistance than expected. Still, he pressed forward. Planting his feet, he shifted into another stance and released a continuous barrage with his staff. The attacks came one after another, leaving almost no visible opening. Yet every strike missed by only the narrowest distance. Lee frowned. Then he reassured himself that this was simply proof of the difference between them. Stepping back slightly, he remained completely confident. Even if the opponent was Cheon, this display should have been enough to impress the commanders. Everything had gone exactly according to plan. Now all he expected was applause. Instead, silence. The arena had become strangely quiet. Confused, Lee looked around. Then his vision suddenly shifted. The sky turned. The arena tilted. And before he understood what happened, he found himself lying flat on the ground. A broken piece of wood rested beside him. Above him stood a tall figure blocking the sunlight. Lee slowly looked up. Cheon stood there. With calm eyes, he asked whether he had rested enough. Still confused, Lee tried to understand what had happened. Then his body refused to move. His eyes shifted to the shattered fragments nearby. Only then did he realize the broken weapon was his own. The memory returned instantly. At that exact moment during the clash, Cheon had redirected the exchange and shattered Lee's staff with a single movement. At the same time, a compressed burst of sword energy had exploded outward and struck him directly, throwing him backward before he could react. He had lost completely. Lying on the ground, Lee could not accept that he had been defeated so decisively. Cheon looked down at him. Quietly, he thought of the future betrayal that had once destroyed the Cheon clan. Then he told Lee that he would let this end here. But from now on, he should live carefully. Cheon would be watching. Lee tried to convince himself that he had simply been careless. But the reality in front of him gave him no comfort. Looking up at the young master standing above him, he felt something unfamiliar. For the first time, he felt completely defeated. Around them, the arena exploded into shock. Nobody expected the duel to end in a single exchange. Wolyang's eyes filled with tears. Holding the sword tightly, she excitedly called out to her young master. But Cheon paid little attention. Instead, he raised his eyes toward the elevated platform. Above everyone else, Cheon Muryang sat silently, stroking his beard as he considered the unexpected result. Cheon stood as the victor, looking down at the defeated future traitor lying at his feet. High above, Cheon Muryang observed in silence. His expression revealed nothing. Cheon raised his head and met the commander's gaze directly. The entire arena became quiet as everyone waited for the final decision. On the stadium, Muryang clenched his fists. Anger showed clearly on his face. In his mind, Lee had wasted the perfect opportunity to drive the young master out of the training grounds. Even now, the image of Lee being sent flying remained impossible to accept. Meanwhile, Lee remained on the ground. Cheon stood calmly before him. Cheon Muryang stayed seated and continued thinking. Around them, whispers spread. Many still could not understand how the top disciple had lost in a single exchange. Some quietly suggested there must have been a trick involved. Cheon silently clicked his tongue. If things continued like this, arrogance and resentment would only grow. At that moment, Cheon Muryang narrowed his eyes. It seemed he had reached a conclusion. He stood and began announcing the winner, but Cheon interrupted. He said that he already understood the resentment people held toward him. The sudden interruption surprised everyone. Cheon continued calmly. He admitted that the mistakes of the past could not be erased or ignored. He acknowledged that his previous actions had been shameful and selfish. Both Cheon Muryang and Wolyang looked at him in surprise. Turning toward the crowd, Cheon explained that he could not remember every person he had wronged. Those actions belonged to the former version of himself. Even so, he would accept responsibility. His hand tightened. Then he declared clearly that he was Cheon Muryang here and now. He sincerely apologized for all his past behavior and mistakes. After speaking, he bowed deeply before everyone. Silence filled the training grounds. The disciples stared in disbelief. Wolyang held the sword tightly, while tears formed in her eyes. Even Cheon Muryang could not fully conceal his surprise. Cheon slowly stood upright. Then he turned toward the future ahead of him. He raised his voice and announced that anyone who still held resentment toward him could come to the training grounds at any time. He would remain there. After saying that, he turned away with steady resolve. From above, Cheon Muryang continued watching quietly. Cheon then called for Wolyang to come with him. Cheon Muryang lightly stroked his beard. A faint smile appeared. Under the bright sky, a new day seemed to begin. As they walked, Cheon Muryang thanked Wolyang for keeping the celestial light sword safe. He explained that he had prepared it in case the duel turned into a real sword fight. Wolyang replied that carrying the sword itself had given her confidence. Cheon smiled and said he was glad to hear it. Then he asked her to return it. She blinked in surprise and quietly questioned why. Caught off guard, he hesitated. Wolyang hugged the sword and shyly admitted that she wanted to keep it a little longer because she still needed Little Sky. Cheon Muryang froze. He could not believe she had given his treasured sword nickname. Then a familiar voice called out. Muryang had remained there the entire time. He asked a simple question. With the sword technique shown earlier, what had Cheon intended to cut? Cheon smiled slightly. He never expected to hear that question again. Cheon Muryang repeated it. This time, Cheon Muryang answered immediately. His sword had been aimed at the sky. He intended to cut the heavens themselves. For a moment, Cheon Muryang remained silent. Then he laughed quietly. That answer reflected the same sword path he had followed his entire life. And unexpectedly, the person who understood it best had become the one he once looked down on the most. Accepting the outcome of their wager, Cheon Muryang told Cheon Muryang to state his request. Without hesitation, Cheon Muryang asked for permission to enter the Celestial Dragon Library. Cheon Muryang refused immediately. That decision was outside his authority. Cheon Muryang became quiet for a moment. Then an idea came to him. Instead of requesting access, he proposed something else. Every day, one person should be assigned to duel him. Cheon Muryang looked surprised and asked whether a single duel each day would truly be enough. Cheon Muryang answered calmly. For him, there was no better training than real combat. Cheon Muryang watched him silently and considered the request. Before leaving, he remarked that Cheon Muryang would continue becoming stronger every day. Cheon Muryang simply answered that this was exactly what he intended. As Cheon Muryang walked away, Wolyang asked curiously what it truly meant to cut the sky. Cheon Muryang smiled and explained that it was something only he and the Commander General would understand. The next day, the atmosphere at the training grounds felt unusually tense. Cheon Muryang struck the ground in frustration. He openly complained that this arrangement made no sense. In his eyes, the young master's victory had been nothing more than luck. He believed success had only made him arrogant. He dismissed Li's defeat as nothing more than a failed attempt to show off. Cheon Muryang looked at his sword. He unsheathed it. A fresh scar remained visible across his face. The reflection in the blade brought back an old memory. Years ago, during a night at a tavern, the drunken young master had loudly declared himself heir of the Cheon clan and recklessly waved his sword while provoking everyone around him. Cha and the others had wanted to leave before things became worse. Someone had suggested stopping him before somebody got injured, but nobody stepped forward. Drunk and angry, the young master continued swinging wildly and demanded respect for his title. Then everything happened at once. Someone warned that the blade was dangerous. Cha moved first. Trying to protect another person, he stepped into the path of the strike. The scene descended into confusion. Bleeding and in pain, he held his injury while the drunken young master simply looked confused and accused him of exaggerating. Then he told him to leave. Others panicked at the sight. Now, staring into the sword's reflection, Muryang's expression hardened. That memory remained. On the first day of the new duels, his assigned opponent stepped forward. It was Cheon Muryang. A cold smile appeared on his face. Looking at his own scar, he decided that just as he had been marked once, he would leave the same mark on Cheon Muryang. Under the bright sun of the Cheon clan training grounds, Cheon Muryang continued moving. Again and again, his body rose and fell. Each strike drew a clean line through the air. Every movement was controlled. Every motion was repeated exactly. Nothing was wasted. No hesitation. No unnecessary force. From the stone steps above, Myeong watched quietly. He had been assigned as the sparring partner for the day. Slowly, irritation began appearing on his face. The one who demanded daily duels had not even looked at him once. Instead, Cheon Muryang remained fully absorbed in training. Myeong watched his breathing. He remembered the bold claim that only real combat and genuine danger created growth. He had come prepared to test whether the young master had truly changed. But as time passed, his certainty slowly became something harder to define. Before his thoughts could continue, a soft voice interrupted him. A tray of tea appeared beside him. Turning, Myeong found Wolyang standing there with a calm expression. She explained gently that once the young master began training, he often lost track of everything around him, and it might take some time before their duel could begin. Her tone was warm but certain. She offered refreshments. Myeong accepted the tea while quietly observing her. He had already heard the rumors. She was the maid the young master had once protected. Still, something felt unfamiliar. Even standing still, he noticed a thin layer of sweat forming across his forehead. Wolyang's quiet smile seemed to notice his discomfort before he spoke. When he asked whether the young master trained like this every day, she confirmed it. Not a single day had been missed. Although she admitted that his effort was admirable compared to before, she still worried that he was pushing himself too hard. Cha Myeong eventually asked why she remained loyal to someone who had once treated her badly. She did not deny the past. Instead, she answered calmly. He had changed. He was trying to take responsibility for who he had been, and she believed in that effort. Her words stayed with him, but his attention returned to the training field. Slowly, irritation disappeared and became careful observation. Something felt unusual. The young master was not practicing different techniques. He was repeating one movement endlessly. The longer he watched, the stranger it became. The position of each step never changed. The height of each leap remained identical. Every descending strike followed exactly the same line. Even the grip never shifted. It felt unnatural, impossible. A chill slowly moved through Cha Myeong. As he followed the path of the sword, he unconsciously imagined himself standing beneath it. In his mind, the wooden blade descended toward his throat and stopped at the final moment. Even though nothing had happened, the pressure felt real. His breathing stopped briefly. Cold sweat spread across his back. He had not entered the field, yet it felt as though the sword had already reached him. Then suddenly, the training ended. Cheon Muryang lowered his sword and turned around. His expression remained calm. He apologized lightly for making him wait. To him, nothing unusual had happened. Cha Myeong remained silent for a moment. Then something else surprised him. The young master greeted him properly, by name. That simple detail unsettled him more than the training. For someone from the main family to remember the name of an ordinary trainee felt impossible. When he expressed his surprise, Cheon Muryang answered simply. One day, every trainee would become a warrior of the Cheon clan. Because of that, he wanted to remember them all. Myeong had no reply. Then Cheon's eyes moved toward the scar across his face. Quietly, he asked whether he had caused it. Cha Myeong answered immediately. Yes. Understanding appeared in Cheon's eyes. That scar belonged to the person he had once been. Someone who would never have remembered. Someone who would never have cared. Slowly, Cheon's sheathed his sword. Then, to Cha Myeong's complete surprise, he bowed deeply. Not as formality, not for appearance. A sincere apology. He admitted that his foolish actions had left wounds that could not be undone. He could not erase the past, but he still asked for forgiveness. For a moment, everything felt still. A member of the main family, bowing to a trainee, went against everything Cha believed. The memories of the arrogant young master and the person standing before him no longer matched. After a long silence, he quietly placed his teacup down. Then he made his decision. He said that he had lost. Cheon Muryang looked confused. The duel had not even started. But Cha Myeong repeated himself. He had not lost in strength. He had lost in character. With new respect in his eyes, he said he would return better prepared before challenging him again. Then he turned and left. Cheon watched him leave with a small smile, believing his apology had been accepted. But Wolyang noticed something different. Beneath the respect, she could see an even stronger determination taking root. Soon after, Cheon Muryang made an unusual request. He asked Wolyang to record every wrongdoing he had ever committed without leaving anything out, including any harm he had caused her personally. She was surprised and emotional, but she agreed. For him, this was not simple reflection. It was the beginning of real change. The weight of the past was his responsibility alone. From the next day onward, the duels truly began. Opponents arrived one after another. Some called it karma. Others came carrying resentment. They fought without restraint. Yet Cheon Muryang met every challenge calmly. His one-in sword blocked their attacks cleanly, and many matches ended in a single exchange. One by one, his opponents fell. After every victory, he offered a hand and helped them stand again, sincerely acknowledging their effort. Wolyang quietly kept track. 6 victories, no defeats. Still, she found herself strangely annoyed by how kindly he treated people who came to take revenge. But another battle was unfolding quietly. After the 6th duel, Cheon Muryang sat alone in meditation. Sweat gathered across his forehead as he circulated internal energy and attempted to reach the 7th stage of the heavenly young divine art. But something resisted. The remaining yin energy blocked his meridians and disrupted the flow of qi. Forcing it further would only cause damage. A faint blue glow flickered in his eyes as he continued trying. Eventually, he reached a conclusion. To overcome this obstacle, he needed a higher cultivation method, one stored inside the Celestial Dragon Library. When he finally opened his eyes, an uneasy feeling remained. Something important was approaching. Then he remembered. The family head was returning that day. The person who had once taken him in. The person he had never been able to call father. Wearing formal robes and adjusting the sword at his side, Cheon Muryang felt a quiet anticipation. For a brief moment, he imagined saying that word, father. But before the thought settled, urgent shouting broke the silence. A maid came running toward him in tears. It was Wong, a close friend of Wolyang. Panic filled her voice. Before she could even explain properly, Cheon Muryang asked about Wolyang. The answer came immediately. She was with a woman rumored to be his fiancée. Without hesitation, he moved. By the time he arrived, the courtyard had already fallen into disorder. A table had been overturned. Food was scattered everywhere. Meat and vegetables covered the ground. Wolyang knelt there trembling and repeatedly apologized over the ruined dishes. Standing above her was a noblewoman dressed in elegant white robes now marked with stains. Her expression remained cold and dismissive. Several guards stood behind her. Their presence alone felt oppressive. The woman ignored every apology. Hiding part of her face behind a fan, she casually ordered her attendants to enforce their clan's law. Immediately, one warrior stepped forward. His sword slid from its sheath. The blade reflected sunlight as he raised it above Wolyang's bowed head. Another servant rushed forward and begged them to stop. The executioner did not hesitate. The sword began falling. Then, steel collided. Another blade intercepted the strike only moments before it reached Wolyang. The entire courtyard froze. Everyone turned. Standing in front of her, protecting her, was Cheon Muryang. His sword remained drawn, and in his eyes appeared a cold anger no one there had ever seen before. The warriors quickly surrounded him, weapons lifted, ready to move. But Cheon Muryang ignored them completely. His presence alone silenced the courtyard. Cheon Muryang stood in front of them without moving. His presence remained calm, steady, and impossible to ignore. His voice carried quiet certainty, as if protecting someone inside the Cheon estate required no explanation. Wolyang looked up at him. Relief trembled in her eyes as she quietly called for her young master. The warriors from the Tang clan remained unmoved. They demanded to know who he was and what authority allowed him to interfere. Without changing his expression, Cheon Muryang introduced himself as the eldest young master of the Cheon family. The reaction was immediate. Several guards stiffened. The noblewoman's expression changed. Her confidence remained, but became more restrained. With a graceful apology, she introduced herself. She was from the Tang clan. Her name was Tang Sohai. The moment Cheon Muryang heard it, everything returned. In his previous life, Tang Sohai had become his wife. She had also become one of the people responsible for the collapse of his family. Old memories surfaced. When his body had once been destroyed by unstable elixirs, the Cheon family had desperately sought help from the Tang clan, known for poison and antidotes. In exchange, they offered a marriage alliance. The Tang clan accepted immediately, not from goodwill, but for influence. It was their chance to extend power into the Central Plains. Tang Sohai had arrived prepared for marriage. Even when she saw her future husband unconscious and broken, her expression had not changed. The marriage moved forward. Over the following years, under the excuse of treatment, the Tang clan slowly expanded their influence. The family head had allowed it. Step by step, they turned the Cheon family into a foundation for their own rise. That marriage had never been salvation. It had been the beginning of ruin. Returning to the present, Cheon Muryang's expression cooled. He repeated his question. Tang Sohai glanced at the stained clothes and casually dismissed the matter. According to her, she had only punished a maid who ruined something valuable. The answer made his eyes harden. He asked whether such a small mistake justified taking someone's life inside the Cheon estate. She replied lightly. In her view, he did not understand the value of what had been ruined. Then her tone sharpened. She suggested the maid could have been an assassin and claimed the punishment followed Tang clan law. That ended the discussion. Cheon Muryang's voice became firm. This was not Tang territory. This was the Cheon estate. Only Cheon clan law held authority here. He accused her directly of crossing the line and disrespecting his family. One of her guards stepped forward. He argued that if Tang law disappeared outside their territory, then it had never been true law. A faint smile appeared on Tang Sohai's face. She challenged him to stop them. At her signal, the lead guard advanced. His sword left the sheath. A heavy pressure spread from his body. Cheon Muryang recognized it immediately. Sword aura, a technique belonging to true masters. For the first time, concern appeared. The guard attacked. His blade carried condensed force. Cheon Muryang met it directly. Steel collided. Sparks scattered. The impact traveled through his arms. At the same time, Tang Sohai quietly shifted her attention toward Woleong. Without drawing attention, she slipped a needle into her hand. Her movements disappeared beneath the noise of battle. The courtyard filled with the sound of clashing steel. Cheon Muryang's swordsmanship remained refined, but the difference in internal energy became obvious. Every exchange forced him backward. His jaw tightened. The pressure continued building. Soon, he understood clearly. This was not a battle he could win through strength alone. Realizing strength alone would not work, Cheon Muryang changed his approach. He abandoned direct confrontation and relied on precision. Drawing from techniques mastered in his previous life, he stopped targeting the opponent and focused entirely on the weapon. The moment the guard's blade entered his range, Cheon Muryang moved. Using the Heavenly Dragon Sword unit's Dragon Claw capture, he redirected the incoming force and guided the sword aura away from himself. The released energy crashed into the stone courtyard and shattered the ground. For a brief moment, the guard froze. His strongest attack had been neutralized far too cleanly, but the advantage disappeared quickly. Recovering immediately, the guard retrieved his weapon with a mocking expression. Cheon Muryang, pushed down and left unarmed, quietly accepted the reality. No matter how refined his techniques were, the difference in internal energy remained overwhelming. Before the battle continued, Tang Sohai stepped forward. Her expression carried mild amusement. She commented that she was pleased to see her future husband willing to protect even a servant. Then, as if nothing important had happened, she informed him that she would see him again at the evening banquet and hoped he would behave more reasonably then. After that, she turned to leave. Then, a cry echoed through the courtyard. Cheon Muryang turned immediately. Woleong had collapsed. Another maid knelt beside her and desperately tried to wake her. In the distance, Tang Sohai paused. Quietly, she reconsidered what she had seen. The information she received about Cheon Muryang no longer matched reality. If the truth had changed, the marriage itself might need to change as well. She asked the guard for his judgment. He calmly answered that the young master's swordsmanship was impressive, but his internal energy remained weak. 2 men would be enough. Tang Sohai gave a quiet order. Tonight, the eldest young master must not appear at the banquet. Meanwhile, panic surged through Cheon Muryang. He rushed to Woleong's side. Her face had become pale. Her breathing turned uneven. Dark shadows appeared beneath her eyes. Then his gaze moved to the scattered food. Instantly, he understood. Poison. Her cheerful words from earlier returned to him. She had proudly said she prepared something better than porridge. A cold anger settled inside him. Carefully, he lifted her into his arms and ordered Wong to bring his sword. As he carried Woleong away, someone hidden behind a pillar watched everything. A trembling spy hesitated, uncertain whether to report the incident to Nungryo. Soon the young master's residence became chaotic. Healers gathered around the bed where Woleong lay trembling under the effects of poison. After exhausting every attempt, the chief physician finally stepped back. His hands were stained with herbs. He admitted that the poison had been slowed temporarily. But if it truly originated from the Tang clan, only their antidote could save her. Woleong's body burned with fever. Sweat covered her pale face. Her breathing became rough. Cheon Muryang stood quietly beside her. Guilt pressed heavily against him. He wanted to say something, but nothing came. Finally, he turned to Wong. Calmly, he instructed her to stay beside Woleong. Her voice shook as she asked where he intended to go. Cheon Muryang did not answer. He picked up his sword. Then he walked toward the door. Before leaving, he asked about the family head's banquet. As the son of the clan head, how could he fail to attend? His eyes hardened. The people responsible would be there, and tonight they would face his anger. Elsewhere, Cheon Muryang walked alone through a long corridor. His steps remained steady, but his thoughts were heavy. Bringing the Tang clan into conflict carried serious risks. If anything went wrong, they would not hesitate to consume the Cheon family entirely. He slowly exhaled and tried to clear his thoughts. Then he felt it. A surge of chi cut through the air. Sharp, violent, unfamiliar. It came from a forest beyond the estate, deep among the trees. There, Cheon Muryang stood surrounded by destruction. His sword moved again and again. Thick trunks split apart under each strike. Wood scattered. Leaves drifted. Dust filled the air. Every movement was precise, but there was no calm. Only anger. Cheon Muryang arrived quietly and watched from a distance. He understood immediately. This was not the heaven-cleaving sword meant to reach the sky. This was different. Every strike carried killing intent. It was a sword aimed at people, not principles. And that path was dangerous. A sword consumed by anger would eventually destroy the one holding it. Then, Cheon Muryang gathered everything into one final strike. The blade descended in a clean vertical line. A tall tree split perfectly in half and collapsed. The sound echoed through the forest. Dust rose. Cheon Muryang stepped back slightly. His breathing grew heavy. His hands trembled around the sword. Only then did Cheon Muryang step forward. Breaking the silence, he asked why someone who once spoke of reaching the heavens was now directing anger toward trees. What had pushed him this far? Cheon Muryang did not answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice remained quiet. He said he was weak. Because of that weakness, he failed to protect his people. If he wanted to protect them, he had to become stronger. There was no other path. Cheon Muryang repeated the words quietly. His people. There was clear surprise in his expression. Cheon Muryang finally turned. Lowering his head slightly, he answered. The people he wanted to protect were the Cheon family. The meaning reached deeper than expected. At that moment, Cheon Muryang realized he had misunderstood him. This was not pride, not ambition. It was responsibility. A quiet sense of shame settled inside him. For the first time, he truly understood the weight behind the young master's determination. A faint smile appeared on Cheon Muryang's face. Then he drew his sword. Earlier, Cheon Muryang had boldly claimed he could reproduce the heavenly dragon sword's dragon claw capture after seeing it only once. He had even offered to imitate another technique if shown. Now it was time to prove it. Cheon Muryang looked confused. But Cheon Muryang moved immediately. His blade swept through the air, not to strike, but to reveal something. He revealed that he himself was the creator of Dragon Claw Capture, the founder of the technique passed down to the Heavenly Dragon Sword unit. And beyond that, he had created another form, a technique never taught to anyone, a sword balance between cutting the sky and cutting human flesh. A violent surge of energy erupted outward. His presence expanded like a storm. Raising his sword, Cheon Muryang revealed the hidden technique, Dragon's Wrath. Then he moved. His speed exploded forward. The air itself seemed to tear apart. For a brief moment, Cheon Muryang's thoughts stopped. Before he could react, Cheon Muryang revealed the final form. Reverse scale, cleaving sword. The pressure descended like a mountain. Not far from the forest, hidden in the darkness, a group of people waited silently. They belonged to the young master's fiancé. One man with a thick beard stared toward the trees and muttered about the sudden disturbance. Another looked briefly in the same direction before reminding everyone to stay focused. Their mission had to be completed before the banquet began. Moving quickly, they concealed bundles of clothing among the bushes. Every movement remained careful and deliberate. One of them produced a small glass bottle filled with poison. He explained calmly that it came directly from their lady. Once administered, the young master would be unable to move for several days. The symptoms would resemble drunkenness so naturally that even experienced physicians would fail to notice. All they had to do was arrange the scene to make it appear that he had simply collapsed. Then their task would be complete. The bearded man sneered. Even if the young master claimed someone attacked him, nobody would believe him. His reputation would work against him. Another confidently added that their disguises were flawless and nothing would lead back to them. After a final nod, they began moving toward the forest clearing. None of them realized the storm they sensed was not fading. It was becoming sharper. Back in the clearing, Cheon Muryang stood among broken trees and scattered leaves. His breathing remained heavy. Sweat soaked his clothes. His sleeves had torn from the force of repeated movements. He looked at Cheon Muryang and asked whether he truly intended to push things far enough to kill his own blood grandson. The surroundings answered more clearly than words. Trees had been split cleanly. The earth was scarred. Dust still drifted through the air. The power of reverse scale, cleaving sword remained vivid. He could feel it deep inside. Cheon Muryang remained calm. His sword still hummed with lingering energy. Then he asked a question. Did Cheon Muryang understand the difference between reverse scale, cleaving sword, and dragon claw capture? He explained quietly. When a swordsman grows accustomed to the blade, he begins believing it is part of his own body. That belief becomes weakness. Dragon claw capture exists to break that illusion. It does not simply attack the body. It attacks the assumption. It reminds the wielder that the sword can be redirected, separated, and broken. Anyone who charges forward without awareness risks losing the weapon itself. Cheon Muryang's eyes sharpened. Understanding slowly appeared. So that was the true sky of dragon claw capture. Not force, insight. Cheon Muryang continued. Even so, the technique remained incomplete. Against true masters, where the difference in power became overwhelming, it could still fail. Old memories surfaced. Defeats. Moments where strength alone had not been enough. But Cheon Muryang had not finished. Even those who reached the highest level still held one final misunderstanding. He asked whether Cheon Muryang knew what it was. The answer surfaced immediately. The sky of reverse scale, cleaving sword. Cheon Muryang straightened. He calmly said he understood. Cheon Muryang studied him and asked whether he truly believed he could reach that level. Cheon Muryang answered honestly. Mastering it in one attempt was impossible for him now. But before the banquet, he would reach it. Cheon Muryang slowly shook his head. That was not what he meant. He was speaking about something far greater. Protecting the Cheon family. Those words struck harder than any blade. For a moment, silence remained between them. Then Cheon Muryang smiled faintly. His eyes stayed calm and unwavering. He would protect them. That was his answer. Not emotional. Not exaggerated. Just certain. Cheon Muryang quietly returned his sword to its sheath and gave a small nod. The energy around the forest had changed. It no longer felt stable. Something beyond their clash was moving nearby. He sensed unfamiliar presences hiding in the distance. Quietly, he referred to them as filthy rats. Deciding not to interfere further, he turned toward the banquet hall and left. Cheon Muryang lowered his head briefly in respect. When he looked up again, his expression had changed. Exhaustion no longer mattered. His anger had stopped being reckless. Now it had direction. His eyes moved toward the shadows between the trees. If something was hiding, he would bring it out himself. Hidden among the bushes, several suspicious men waited. They wore trainee clothing and believed their disguises were convincing. But their age and manner exposed them. The moment Cheon Muryang saw them, he knew something was wrong. The three disguised men stepped forward carefully and politely claimed they were trainees searching for a place to practice. Cheon Muryang responded immediately. His sword rose and pointed directly at them. Calmly, he stated that their faces alone proved they did not belong. He had memorized every trainee in the clan. These men were strangers. Rather than caution, there was a strange focus in his eyes. Almost as if he welcomed the confrontation. Realizing the disguise had failed, the leader dropped the act. His tone hardened. He ordered the others to capture the young master and force the poison into him. At the same time, life continued elsewhere inside the clan. At a distant training field, disciples who had once lost to Cheon Muryang pushed themselves harder than before. His growth had left an impression. Nungryo continued running through the forest, determined to become strong enough to reclaim the sword he had lost. Even Cheon Muryang, who usually trained casually, pushed himself with heavy weights until his body reached its limit. Across the Cheon clan, the young master's progress had inspired others to improve. Then suddenly, a trainee rushed into the field in panic. He shouted that something had happened to the young master. At first, nobody reacted. Some continued practicing forms. Others kept carrying logs or training silently. The messenger nearly gave up. But once he finally explained, everything changed. Nong Rin and Cheon Muryang reacted immediately. Their expressions sharpened. Concern replaced indifference. The messenger froze. Only then did he realize how seriously they had begun taking the young master. Back in the forest, the silence disappeared. Leaves scattered as the assassins attacked. Cheon Muryang met the leader directly. Steel collided. Sparks burst outward. Even against trained killers, his movements remained controlled. One attacker was already on the ground. The remaining two struggled to keep up. He moved cleanly through every attack. His sword stayed efficient and precise. The assassins quickly understood their mistake. They had underestimated him. Then, Cheon Muryang stepped forward and drove the hilt of his sword into the leader's chest. The man lost his breath and collapsed. He stared upward in disbelief. He could not understand how someone rumored to be weak possessed such strength. Cheon Muryang looked down quietly. His expression remained calm, as if this entire fight had been nothing more than a way to release what he had been carrying. The defeated men remained scattered across the ground. One of them tried to stand and escape, but Cheon Muryang noticed immediately. The leader remained on the ground, struggling to breathe. Only now did he understand. The rumors about the young master being weak were completely wrong. Throughout the fight, Cheon Muryang's speed and pressure had only continued increasing. The assassin cursed internally. Because of their disguise, they had been forced to abandon their usual Tang clan weapons and methods. Without those tools, they could not fight properly. Sweat gathered across his face. They had misjudged their target from the beginning. Cheon Muryang stood quietly with his sword lowered. Then he calmly asked whether they were ready to explain why they had come. In truth, he already knew. The assassin refused. Without evidence, nobody could connect them to the Tang clan's covert operation. Cheon Muryang answered calmly. Proof was unnecessary. Only one clan would act this boldly inside the Cheon estate. The Tang clan. The assassin froze. What surprised him was not the accusation, but the certainty. Cheon Muryang had already considered the consequences. Even suspicion alone could be enough to destroy the marriage alliance the Tang clan wanted. That realization struck harder than defeat. Humiliated, the assassin responded with ridicule. He mocked Cheon Muryang's youth and confidence. He refused to accept being cornered by someone younger. But Cheon Muryang had already stopped listening. Words no longer mattered. Only action. Quietly, he adjusted his stance. This time, he intended to test the technique he had just learned. In an instant, he moved. His body surged forward. The sword rose high, then descended. Reverse scale, cleaving sword. The form passed down by Cheon Muryang. The assassin reacted instinctively and raised his weapon. Steel collided. A violent shock wave spread outward. Birds scattered from the trees. Nearby trunks trembled. Then, everything became quiet. When the dust settled, a long path had been carved through the forest. Trees stood split apart. Sunlight poured into the opening. The destruction spoke for itself. Cheon Muryang's strength had already exceeded what people expected. Elsewhere, deep within the forest, the leader of the Tang clan's operation slowly became uneasy. He checked a rough sundial. 45 minutes had passed since he sent 3 assassins after the young master. None had returned. The silence no longer felt normal. Something had gone wrong. If they had failed, then the target was far more dangerous than expected. A chill spread through him. Their entire mission had become unstable. He began pacing. Already, he considered how to erase every trace before the Cheon family discovered the truth. Meanwhile, news of the courtyard incident spread among the trainees. Many remained unsettled after hearing that someone had nearly executed a servant over such a small matter. As several trainees walked through the forest, they spoke quietly about the Tang clan. Stories resurfaced. Harsh laws, deadly poison, hidden weapons. People claimed even accidental offenses against direct descendants could bring severe punishment. Now, they understood why people became nervous whenever the Tang clan's young lady appeared. Compared to that, life inside the Cheon family seemed far more forgiving. Some admitted their own young master had once caused problems. But at least the Cheon clan did not take lives over minor mistakes. Even Nong Run had openly opposed the young master and remained unharmed. That alone would have been impossible elsewhere. As the conversation continued, another question emerged. If conflict with the Tang clan truly escalated, should they stand with Cheon Muryang? Some were uncertain. Against an enemy like that, they were not sure how much they could do. At that moment, one senior disciple raised his voice. He declared that the honor of the clan was at stake and urged everyone to search for the young master immediately. Not everyone believed him. Several trainees exchanged cautious looks. To them, his sudden loyalty seemed opportunistic. If the situation turned dangerous, they suspected he would abandon that attitude just as quickly. Even so, the group continued deeper into the forest. Then, the same trainee noticed something unusual. Hidden among the shadows, a Tang clan cleaner crouched beside a small fire. Bundles of clothing were being burned one by one. Every movement was deliberate. Evidence was being destroyed. The trainee froze. His heart began racing. He understood immediately that he had seen something he was never meant to see. For a moment, he stayed completely still and hoped to go unnoticed. Then the cleaner stopped. His head turned sharply. Their eyes met. The man had sensed him. Panic took over. The trainee turned and ran. Branches snapped beneath his feet as he pushed forward without looking back. His breathing became uneven. Fear drove him forward. He finally burst onto the forest path and collapsed in front of the others. Everyone stared in confusion. Trembling, he tried to explain. He had seen something, but before he could finish, the atmosphere changed. The air suddenly turned cold. A figure dropped from the trees. The Tang clan cleaner descended with sword already drawn. The meaning was obvious. No witnesses would leave alive. The terrified trainee barely had time to react. The sword fell, too fast to follow. Then, blood scattered across the forest floor. But that was not the end. The others had already arrived. One of the hidden attackers immediately moved. Inside his mind, only one thought remained. The witness had seen the burned clothes. If he spoke, everyone would discover they disguised themselves to ambush the eldest young master. He had to die. The attacker rushed forward again. But before the strike landed, Cha stepped in and blocked. Holding the attack clearly demanded effort. The cleaner's eyes widened. He could not understand how an ordinary trainee had stopped him. Then another trainee attacked. The cleaner narrowly avoided the strike and jumped backward. Confused, he demanded to know who they really were. If they were only trainees, how could they fight like this? One disciple answered firmly. They were not ordinary trainees. Another added casually that unlike certain people who trained half-naked after being completely defeated by the eldest young master, they had continued moving forward. Then the explanation came. The Tang clan was known for poison. But the Cheon clan was known for something else. The overwhelming swordsmanship of the Heavenly Dragon Sword Unit and Heavenly Phoenix Sword Unit under Commander Cheon Muryang. Only 5 among the top 10 trainees would ever be selected. And they were candidates. One of them casually pointed beside him and excluded his companion. The other immediately agreed with a shrug. The cleaner steadied his breathing. Then he answered coldly. Even if they were talented, they were still trainees. And now, he would show them the difference between trainees and a real warrior. One of the trainees stepped forward confidently. He proposed settling things directly and finding out who was truly superior, 7 against 1. The attacker stared in disbelief. In his mind, these were people he should have eliminated already. Then realization hit him. Someone had interfered midway through. Before he could think further, the trainees moved together. They surrounded him from every direction. His anger exploded. Looking at them coldly, he declared that they knew nothing of the world and that he would show them the difference in level between trainees and real warriors. The trainees advanced as one group. Their formation tightened. Nearby, the other attacker they had defeated remained collapsed on the ground, bruised and barely conscious. Then suddenly, one trainee grabbed his stomach. Complaining loudly, he announced that he needed to leave for a moment and told the others to continue without him. The group reacted immediately. One of them questioned why now of all times. Ignoring them, the trainee quietly stayed behind. His attention shifted to the burned remains. He carefully stopped the flames from spreading further and began inspecting the damaged clothing. As he looked through them, he quietly thought that there had to be a reason someone wanted these destroyed. If that was true, keeping them might become useful later, maybe even valuable if circumstances ever changed. From a distance, someone shouted and asked whether the head trainee was finished yet. Without shame, he shouted back that something still refused to come out and he would arrive soon. Another voice immediately complained and told him to stop sharing details. Meanwhile, attention shifted elsewhere. At the training grounds, the discussion continued. One trainee admitted that although Lee was unpleasant, he had been right about one thing. Another agreed. Right now, finding the eldest young master mattered more than anything else. Elsewhere, Cheon Muryang quietly examined a small glass bottle. The same bottle containing poison. Its contents were observed carefully. Then, the scene shifted again. The grand palace of the Cheon clan came into view. The atmosphere carried anticipation. A loud announcement echoed through the hall. The patriarch had arrived. Immediately, attention gathered at the entrance. The family head entered with composed authority. Guests quietly admired him. Some praised his appearance. Others admired his elegance. Someone joked that they should have been the one to marry him. A nearby companion awkwardly reminded them to act with dignity. Another guest observed that the patriarch resembled a perfectly forged sword, a model for all swordsmen. The patriarch walked forward calmly and acknowledged everyone present. Then he addressed the hall. He thanked the honored guests and martial artists who had attended the banquet. After a brief pause, he announced that before the banquet officially began, he wished to introduce a special guest. Another announcement followed immediately. The lady of the Tang clan had arrived. Surprise spread through the hall. People repeated the name in disbelief. Excitement followed. Some wondered whether she was Tang So-hai, the woman known as the Ice Flower and praised as the greatest beauty of Sichuan. Others questioned why someone from the Tang clan had appeared at the Cheon clan. Then, the patriarch stepped forward once more. With calm authority, he revealed the reason. Tang So-hai had come to strengthen and deepen the relationship between their two clans. Then, without hesitation, the patriarch made an announcement that stunned the entire hall. He formally declared a marriage alliance between the two families. Silence lasted only a moment before whispers spread among the guests. People reacted with confusion and disbelief. Some repeated the words in shock. A marriage with the Sichuan Tang clan. Others immediately wondered who the marriage involved. One person even misunderstood and questioned whether the patriarch himself intended to remarry. Someone nearby quickly corrected the ridiculous conclusion. The discussion continued across the banquet hall. Meanwhile, Tang So-hai quietly observed everything. A faint smile appeared on her face. Inwardly, she felt satisfied. Now that the declaration had been made publicly, reversing it would become far more difficult. At the same time, the patriarch remained standing. His expression stayed composed, but his thoughts moved elsewhere. The council of elders was absent, and once again, he wondered when the main family would truly become united. Then he suddenly asked a question. Where was the eldest young master? His tone sharpened. No matter what, he wanted him brought to the banquet. A guard stepped forward nervously. After searching through the estate, they had still failed to find him. Nearby, one of Tang So-hai's attendants quietly reassured her. Since the eldest young master had not appeared, everything seemed to be proceeding smoothly. People had also been stationed around the banquet hall, disguised as security. There should have been no way for him to enter. The banquet continued, but the atmosphere never became comfortable. Time passed. Then the patriarch spoke again. He said he was considering concluding the banquet. The young master still had not appeared. Before ending the gathering, he stood once more and formally thanked everyone. He expressed gratitude to the honored guests and martial artists who attended. He explained that warriors from the Cheon clan would escort everyone safely and that arrangements had already been made regarding the curfew. But before the banquet could close, chaos erupted outside. Urgent voices echoed beyond the hall. Someone shouted that the front lines had collapsed. Another demanded to know what was happening. Then, before anyone understood, a body crashed into the banquet hall. It was one of the attackers from earlier. Completely defeated, silence spread. Then a figure stepped forward. His presence alone changed the atmosphere. Calm, cold, confident. He questioned how an outsider dared to block his path. Every gaze turned toward the entrance. The hall fell silent. Someone said that the good-for-nothing young master had arrived. And there, standing at the entrance, was Cheon Muryang. Beside him stood the trainees who had followed him. Together, they entered the hall. The clan apprentices watched the scene unfold in shock. Among them, Nungryo showed a faint and uneasy smile. Even he had not expected the eldest young master to act so directly. As tension spread through the hall, Cha suddenly stepped forward. Raising his voice, he ordered everyone to lower their weapons. His tone remained firm as he announced that the person standing before them was truly the eldest young master of the Cheon clan. The patriarch looked confused. He questioned what Cha meant. For a moment, he could not recognize the lean young man standing there as his own son. His reaction surprised everyone. Even Cheon Seon-hak seemed caught off guard by how much his nephew had changed. The patriarch struggled to accept it. Only a few months had passed, yet the difference felt overwhelming. Cheon Muryang stepped forward. Holding himself upright, he faced his father directly. Cheon Muryang spoke in a cold and authoritative voice and demanded an explanation for the disturbance. Cheon Muryang remained calm. He said there was something important he needed to say. After receiving permission, he gathered his thoughts. He already knew the engagement with Tang Sohai was an obstacle. If he wanted the antidote, that connection had to end. Raising his head, he spoke clearly before everyone. He requested that the engagement be canceled. The entire hall erupted. No one expected the eldest young master to openly oppose the patriarch's decision. Tang Sohai, however, remained composed. Her eyes narrowed and her expression stayed unreadable. Cheon Muryang demanded an explanation. Cheon Muryang answered directly. Earlier that day, members of the Tang clan attempted to kill his maid, Wolyang, inside Cheon clan territory. Even after he revealed his identity and intervened, they still attacked. During the conflict, they used the confusion to poison her. Now she remained on the verge of death. Tang Sohai immediately stood. She denied responsibility. According to her, the maid had touched her and stained her clothing, violating their clan's customs. In her view, punishment had been justified. Then she questioned why he was creating such conflict over a servant. Cheon Muryang answered without hesitation. Wolyang was not merely a servant. He reminded Tang Sohai that he had already declared her as one of his own people. For the first time, Tang Sohai fell silent. Her expression tightened with restrained anger. Cheon Muryang let out a quiet sigh. He said this was the first time he had heard of the incident. As patriarch, he acknowledged that he understood and respected the customs of the Tang clan. He also admitted that Wolyang had been the one who initiated contact. However, because the Cheon clan had no authority to enforce another clan's internal rules, he regarded her actions as self-defense. For that reason, he decided not to pursue the matter further. Then he added that although the situation was unfortunate, it was not enough to cancel a marriage alliance already agreed upon by both clans. Cheon Muryang felt disappointed. Across from him, Tang Sohai showed a faint smile, as though events were unfolding exactly as expected. But Cheon Muryang spoke again. Turning toward Tang Sohai, he asked directly whether it was true that her side attacked even after learning the young master's identity. He warned that such an act could become serious enough to break the engagement. Cheon Muryang felt a brief sense of hope. Tang Sohai immediately denied it. According to her, there had been no attack. She described it as a misunderstanding caused by Cheon Muryang interfering unexpectedly during punishment. At that moment, the trainee who witnessed the incident stepped forward. He insisted that what he saw was clearly an attack aimed at the eldest young master. Tang Sohai responded coldly. She asked whether he had any proof. The trainee froze. All he could say was that he saw it himself. Tang Sohai gave a quiet laugh. She suggested he was simply trying to protect the young master and warned that speaking carelessly could become false testimony. Immediately, the apprentices became uneasy. Whispers spread. No one wanted to become involved. Cheon Muryang, however, remained calm. He gave a faint smile. If that was the direction they wanted, he would respond the same way. Then he ordered them to be brought in. Several men entered under guard. Their hands were bound. Among them was the warrior defeated earlier. The sight shocked the entire hall. Even Tang Sohai failed to hide her reaction. Cha stepped forward and announced loudly that these men disguised themselves as trainees and attempted to poison the eldest young master. Cheon Muryang looked surprised and demanded clarification. Cha explained, The men had been carrying a suspicious vial. To confirm its purpose, they were forced to drink it. Soon afterward, they became dazed and exposed its intoxicating effects. That revealed the plan. They intended to frame Cheon Muryang and prevent him from attending the banquet. Nungryo stepped forward and added another statement. According to him, the plan never had any chance of succeeding. Over the last several months, the eldest young master had completely stopped drinking. Every day, he trained. Every day, he carried his sword. He even declared that he would risk his life to testify to it. With the prisoners, testimony, and evidence presented, Cheon Muryang became silent. His expression gradually turned serious. Still unwilling to retreat, Tang Sohai questioned once more where the actual proof was. Cheon Muryang smiled slightly. Calling her shameless, he answered that naturally, he had evidence. Then Sanj stepped forward. He reported that he had already consulted the medical hall. Their conclusion was unusual. The substance appeared to be a rare compound combining poison and anesthetic effects. Even they could not fully identify it. But there was one place they believed capable of producing such a substance, the Tang clan. The hall erupted. Guests began whispering. People quietly questioned whether the engagement should continue. Cheon Muryang turned toward Tang Sohai. A faint sarcastic smile appeared. To him, this seemed like the perfect moment to break the engagement. But Tang Sohai simply laughed. To her, the situation had become almost ridiculous. She pointed out that possessing such a substance proved nothing. There was no direct evidence that anyone intended to poison the eldest young master. According to her, the men could have carried it for their own use. As for the clothing, they were nothing more than ordinary apprentice uniforms. Then she raised another point. The Tang clan had only recently arrived. How could they have prepared all of this in advance? Instead, she suggested suspicion should fall on someone inside the Cheon clan. Finally, she proposed consulting the Tang clan's own medical hall to verify whether the substance truly originated from them. Her response caught Cheon Muryang off guard. He had not expected such a fast and calculated counter. Tang Sohai fixed her eyes on him and calmly asked whether he had anything else to present. Her expression suggested she believed control had returned to her side. Just then, a clan subordinate rushed forward. He accused the captured men of attacking them. One had stabbed a person in the chest. Another attacked from behind. Cha lowered his head slightly. With visible frustration, he admitted that it no longer mattered. The advantage had already shifted. Tang Sohai quietly returned to her seat. Her relaxed expression made it seem as though everything had unfolded exactly as planned. Then Cheon Muryang spoke. He stated that he agreed with Lady Tang's reasoning. The matter would continue under investigation. He added that the identities of everyone involved would be examined separately. But testimony from the hall alone could not be accepted as final proof. Then, he turned toward Cheon Muryang. His expression became colder. Did he have any further evidence proving these men truly belonged to the Tang clan? His warning followed immediately. Making accusations against another clan without proof was serious. If this had all been done only to prevent the marriage, it would become a grave offense. The punishment would not be light. Even the eldest young master could be disowned or handed over to the Tang clan. His gaze remained fixed on his son. One final time, he asked whether there was more evidence. A chill ran through Cheon Muryang. He realized how badly the situation had changed. At this moment, he had nothing left. Even if future investigation revealed the truth, it would come too late to stop the engagement. More importantly, by then, Woleon would already be dead. This had to end now. Another thought crossed his mind. If the truth disappeared completely, the consequences would become far worse than the risk he faced now. Then he notices Lee Suki's calm expression. Suddenly, Lee clutched his stomach. He spoke up and urgently asked permission to leave. His timing felt strangely out of place. Cheon Muryang watched him carefully. Something about his calm attitude felt unnatural. Lee pushed through the crowd, while repeatedly insisting it was an emergency. Immediately, Cheon Muryang remembered the forest. Earlier, Lee had been on his way to find him. Back then, he had seemed oddly relieved after meeting him. Cheon Muryang had stopped him and questioned him directly. He suggested that the sudden attack happened because Lee had seen something beyond the hill. Lee denied it immediately. He insisted he had seen nothing. Cheon Muryang only smiled faintly. He reminded him that they were connected now, and betrayal would not end well. Lee hurried to reassure him. Claiming complete loyalty as the head disciple, he denied any intention of doing such a thing. At the time, Cheon Muryang let the matter pass. Now back inside the hall, Cheon Muryang cursed inwardly. That man could not even hold out a little longer. Even so, he remained calm. He declared that everything he had said was true and contained no deception. Then, he asked that the apprentices be spared. Even if the truth was ignored, punishing him alone would be enough. Cheon Muryang rejected the request immediately. He declared that all 7 apprentices involved would receive severe punishment. Lee froze. 7? His thoughts began counting. Then his eyes widened. The 7th was himself. He could not understand how he had become involved. At that moment, Cheon Muryang stepped forward again. He calmly asked whether the disciple who led the entire scheme would receive an even harsher punishment. Lee panicked. His words stumbled over each other. Before he could explain, Cheon Muryang answered coldly. Whoever held responsibility would naturally be punished. And if the accusations proved false, that person would be executed. The words struck Lee immediately. Fear spread across his face. Sweat ran down his skin. Then, he remembered. The evidence. The burned clothing. Originally, he planned to hand it over later and use it to secure a place inside the Tang clan. But everything had changed. If he remained silent, he would die with everyone else. Cheon Muryang stepped forward once more. He stated that all 7 apprentices were tied together in this matter. Again, he asked for mercy. Then he pushed even further. If punishment truly had to happen, then all 8 of them should die together. Especially Lee, whose loyalty seemed deep enough to continue even after death. His voice became colder. He calmly described brutal punishments. Tearing out nails. Removing eyes. Cutting tongues. Disembowelment. The descriptions completely shattered Lee's composure. Unable to endure the pressure, he suddenly shouted. He had evidence. Cheon Muryang slowly turned toward him. A faint smile appeared. His plan had worked. For a moment, both Cheon Muryang and Tang Sohai looked confused. Shaking nervously, Lee pulled out the half-burned clothing. He confessed. Earlier, when he climbed the hill, he witnessed Tang clan warriors burning these clothes. According to him, they belonged to the people who disguised themselves after the failed ambush. They attempted to destroy the evidence. But he saw everything. He also revealed that those same warriors later attacked the apprentices to silence him. Speaking quickly, he admitted delaying the report because he wanted to confirm the truth first. Then he asked for forgiveness. The hall stirred. Several apprentices quietly apologized. They realized they had doubted him. Suddenly, a guard rushed forward. His intention was obvious. Silence Lee. But before he reached him, a fast strike stopped him. In an instant, Lee found himself surrounded. His companions stepped forward and protected him. The half-burned clothes were placed in full view. Now, they had become evidence. Tang Sohai's expression darkened. Inside, she cursed her subordinates. But she still refused to retreat. She admitted that the clothes belonged to Tang clan warriors, then immediately questioned how that connected them to the intruders. Once again, she accused them of making claims without proof. Before Tang Sohai could continue, Cheon Muryang interrupted her. A faint smile appeared on his face as he warned her to choose her words carefully. Then he revealed something else. The Cheon clan possessed a trained tracking hound named Thunder. If brought here, it could follow the scent left on the clothes and expose the truth. Tang Sohai's expression tightened. She knew well that such animals could detect even the smallest traces. Seeing her reaction, Cheon Muryang pressed further. He demanded the antidote. If she refused, he would call the hound, uncover everything, and cancel the engagement. Then he asked calmly whether she was prepared to endure the humiliation once the truth became public. Finally, he told her to hand over the antidote and leave Saya. Even then, Tang Sohai refused. She asked whether he truly intended to turn the Tang clan into an enemy over a single maid. Without hesitation, Cheon Muryang extended his hand again. His voice remained calm and steady as he repeated his demand. Tang Sohai's expression twisted. She could not accept being cornered like this. Then, a powerful voice echoed through the hall. It questioned why conflict existed over a marriage that had already been decided. A terrifying purple aura spread across the banquet hall. The pressure alone changed the atmosphere. Cheon Muryang felt a shock run through him. Was this the legendary purple flame said to belong only to masters beyond the peak level? His presence overwhelmed the room. With open hostility, he accused the Cheon clan of disrespecting an honored guest. His warning was cold. No one had ever insulted the Tang clan and remained without consequences. But Cheon Muryang remained completely calm. Without hesitation, he released his own presence. He warned the elder to be careful with his words. To everyone's shock, Cheon Muryang displayed the same level of power. A purple cloud-like flame surrounded him as well, though his carried a faint rose hue. The two forces collided. Their energies pressed against one another and filled the hall. Then, Cheon Muryang spoke again. If the elder continued speaking recklessly, he would personally demonstrate the power of the heavenly dragon sword. The words swept through the hall. For a brief moment, the Tang elder hesitated, but only briefly. The next instant, both masters moved. Their power crashed together and shook the entire hall. Immediately, the guards reacted. Weapons were drawn. Warriors of the Cheon clan stepped forward in perfect coordination, ready to defend the clan without hesitation. Within moments, the banquet hall resembled a battlefield. Both sides stood facing each other. The tension reached its limit. The guests watched in fear. No one understood how an engagement banquet had reached this point. Quiet whispers spread. Had things gone too far? Then, Cheon Muryang slowly stood. The moment he rose, a powerful pressure filled the hall. Everything fell silent. His presence alone suppressed the conflict. In a firm voice, he told the Tang elder to calm down. He stated that a marriage agreement could not be broken by one side alone, unless a serious offense had occurred. The elder responded sharply. His words made it sound as though the Cheon clan itself wanted to cancel the engagement. Cheon Muryang answered calmly. If his words created that impression, then he would apologize. But as he continued, a sudden surge of power erupted behind him. Everyone looked up. Energy spread through the hall. 7 colors appeared, forming a brilliant rainbow-like light that covered the entire room. The scene became both beautiful and overwhelming. Then, with a decisive movement, Cheon Muryang struck the table. Within the swirling energy, a sword emerged. It was unlike an ordinary weapon. 5 separate blades formed together. Each carried a different color. The pressure released from it was immense. Breathing itself became difficult. The guests immediately recognized it. Voices rose in disbelief. It was the legendary 5-bladed rainbow sword, one of the 5 heavenly swords wielded only by those who reached an extraordinary realm. Its presence alone dominated the entire hall. Cheon Muryang's eyes turned cold. Everything had limits. Then, in a calm but commanding voice, he warned everyone not to push him any further. Once control returned, he instructed the Grand Master to listen carefully. After receiving acknowledgement, he firmly ordered the investigation to begin with the Tang clan warrior uniform recovered by the trainee. At his command, a man stepped forward and presented the clothing before everyone. Nearby, the accused remained restrained. Their expressions reflected the weight of the situation. Inside the heavy silence, Cheon Muryang ordered every person involved to be separated and questioned individually. Their testimonies will be compared carefully. Truth will be separated from lies. No room would remain for uncertainty. Then he added one final condition. Until the investigation concluded, the marriage would remain suspended. An elderly man silently watched. Inwardly, he thought that although the Cheon clan was considered powerful, they remained insignificant compared to the Tang clan's main sect. If necessary, their sect possessed enough strength to erase them entirely. But as he looked again and felt the patriarch's overwhelming martial presence, his confidence weakened. For a moment, standing against that power felt impossible, almost irreverent. Tang Sohai quietly reflected. How had things reached this point? This had been the perfect opportunity. By using this alliance, they intended to overcome the interference of the orthodox factions and establish influence within the Central Plains. Now, that opportunity was slipping away. Quietly, she promised herself that today's humiliation would be repaid many times over. Yet outwardly she smiled. Looking toward the Grand Master, she casually asked whether the Cheon clan was truly a martial family. When the patriarch confirmed it, she made a suggestion. If this was the way of martial families, then the issue should be resolved as martial families do. When overwhelming martial strength appears, resistance loses meaning. So instead, the involved parties should settle the matter through a duel and accept the winner's decision. Then, she turned her eyes toward Cheon Muryang and directly challenged him. Cheon Muryang looked irritated. He questioned why he should agree. Tang Sohai calmly raised a small bottle. The antidote. With a faint smile, she said that if the eldest young master won, she would hand it over as an additional reward. Then she lowered her voice. If he refused, the servant would not survive the night. She guaranteed it. She continued. If the engagement ended through this conflict, bloody war between the two houses and their main sects would become unavoidable. Countless people would suffer. Then she asked him directly, did he truly want that outcome? And she urged him to accept the duel. Cheon Muryang fell silent for a moment. Her words clearly caught him off guard. Meanwhile, Tang Sohai stepped casually behind her large bodyguard and remarked that she was only a frail woman. Because of that, her personal guard would fight in her place. Then she asked who would represent the Cheon clan. She added that it did not necessarily have to be the eldest young master. Cheon Muryang answered first. Being a martial family did not mean accepting every spar challenge. He would decide whether this matter should even be settled through combat. But then, Cheon Muryang spoke. Looking directly at Tang Sohai, he reminded her to keep her promise. Then he turned to the Grand Master and requested permission to accept the duel. Cheon Muryang stared at him in disbelief. Did he truly believe he could face a Tang clan bodyguard? Before he could continue, Cheon Seonhak intervened. Calmly, he suggested waiting and trusting Cheon Muryang. He promised to explain later and urged the patriarch to place faith in his son. Cheon Muryang became quiet. His thoughts turned inward. He remembered the Cheon Muryang he once knew. Lazy, weak, selfish, irresponsible, someone who stayed isolated and had no real allies. Could someone like that truly shoulder this? But when he looked again, things felt different. Cheon Muryang was no longer standing alone. People stood beside him, real allies. The patriarch's expression shifted slightly. After a brief silence, he made his decision. The spar would proceed, and the representative of the Cheon clan would be the eldest young master, Cheon Muryang. The stage was prepared. As the attendants cleared the area, Tang Sohai casually requested the tables be removed. Cheon Muryang added that the chairs should be moved as well. One of the masters laughed quietly and remarked that the two seemed unexpectedly well matched. He even commented to the patriarch that it was rare to see such a fitting pair. Cheon Muryang did not respond. He simply remained silent. Soon afterward, Tang Sohai approached her bodyguard. Calmly, she told him to do his best. Then she paused. As though remembering something, she leaned closer. With a faint smile, she quietly reminded him that no one would be held responsible for accidents during a spar. Even if her future husband lost an arm, her devotion would supposedly remain unchanged. Then she stepped away. The bodyguard remained alone. Soon, the referee entered the field. Cheon Muryang and the bodyguard stood opposite one another. Their focus sharpened. The tension rose. Then, the match began. Both immediately tightened their grip. Without hesitation, Cheon Muryang moved first. A fast slash cut forward. The bodyguard bent backward and avoided it smoothly. Seeing an opening, he immediately aimed for Cheon Muryang's hand. Cheon Muryang withdrew at the last moment. He followed with another strike. The bodyguard blocked using a scabbard, then counterattacked. A powerful sword swing forced Cheon Muryang to evade with difficulty. He leaped backward to create distance, finally landing on one knee. The intensity of the exchange became obvious. The audience reacted immediately. Some questioned whether the bodyguard was using a Cheon fuse sword. Others stared at Cheon Muryang in disbelief. Was this really the same reckless and useless eldest young master they remembered? But Cheon Muryang ignored them. His eyes remained fixed on his opponent. Quietly, he analyzed the exchange. And slowly, he realized something. He had begun to understand the rhythm of the battle. To him, it felt as though he had already seen through the bodyguard's martial arts, right at its absolute peak. Cheon Muryang raised his sword again. The bodyguard leveled his blade in response. Cheon Muryang calmly told him to come. The bodyguard charged forward. Cheon Muryang moved to meet him. Neither side held back. Both committed completely. The bodyguard struck first. Cheon Muryang blocked cleanly. His opponent was a first-class swordsman who had fully mastered sword chi, clearly stronger in raw power. The bodyguard shifted behind him. Cheon Muryang turned and met the attack, but the movement was read immediately and avoided. At that moment, the bodyguard believed victory belonged to him. He aimed a kick. Cheon Muryang narrowly avoided it. His knee nearly touched the ground. The bodyguard retreated briefly before charging again. Cheon Muryang read the target and blocked, but the force behind the strike was overwhelming. Again, the target was his arm. Cheon Muryang continued thinking about it. Why was the bodyguard so determined to take that arm? Then, Cheon Muryang stepped back. The next instant, he accelerated forward at full speed. He needed to confirm whether the opponent could truly keep up. Cheon Muryang left the ground and launched into an overhead strike. Then he disappeared. The bodyguard's expression broke. He thought Cheon Muryang was repeating the same reckless move. Not merely weak, but foolish. He decided to cut straight through everything and take the arm with it. But Cheon Muryang spoke as he moved. Or perhaps the understanding surfaced from somewhere deeper. Within understanding, there is knowledge. There is ignorance. And between them, there is opinion. Opinion appears convincing. Yet it is only incomplete knowledge disguised as truth. That is why sages say opinion can never become absolute proof. A person's understanding of an opponent is nothing more than an opinion built from the past. The moment that happens, they stop seeing a living person. They only see a shell, a figure created from someone who no longer exists. Therefore, the instant someone believes they fully understand an enemy is the instant they understand nothing. Then, Cheon Muryang questioned him. Did he truly believe he understood Cheon Muryang after crossing swords once? Blue light flashed. The bodyguard's sword cut through empty space. Cheon Muryang had already moved beside him. Panic crossed the man's face. He tried to force his blade upward, but it was too late. Cheon Muryang had already passed him. The strike was complete. Cheon Muryang watched silently. The calm expression on his face shifted for the first time. The bodyguard could only scream. Cheon Muryang immediately declared the match finished. Quietly, he judged that although the strike was not a perfect reverse-scale cleaving sword, it was close enough. The bodyguard turned back in disbelief. He could not accept the result. Nearby, the elder and others remained frozen. Only one thought remained. Impossible. Sweat rolled down Tang Sohai's face. Cheon Muryang extended his hand and reminded her to keep her promise. Her jaw tightened. Finally, she handed over the antidote. The moment it reached his hand, Cheon Muryang turned away. Then, his body suddenly faltered. A tremor spread through him. Something was wrong. He felt it before understanding it. His breathing became unstable. During the duel, Cheon Muryang had forcibly opened his meridians for a brief moment to withstand sword chi. Now, the suppressed yin energy flooded back. Every pathway became blocked. The flow of internal energy collapsed. Blood spilled from his nose. His vision slowly turned red. The floor rose beneath him. Cheon Muryang collapsed. The antidote landed nearby. Close enough to see. Close enough to reach. But his body no longer responded. All the trainees immediately rushed toward Cheon Muryang. Before anyone could reach him, Cheon Muryang and Cheon Muryang launched into the air and landed beside him. Cheon Muryang immediately lifted Cheon Muryang and checked his pulse. Cheon Muryang examined him at the same time. The result stopped him. The force blocking Cheon Muryang's meridians was the energy trapped inside his own dantian, the same elixir energy that had remained untouched until now. If it was not resolved immediately, his internal energy would reverse flow, rupture his meridians, and completely destroy his dantian. Before consciousness faded, Cheon Muryang heard Cheon Muryang's voice. Cheon Muryang instructed Cheon Muryang to conclude the banquet, arrange treatment for Cheon Muryang and the trainees, and send the antidote to Woleong immediately. Cheon Muryang accepted quietly. Then, Cheon Muryang lost consciousness. Cheon Muryang immediately transferred his aura. Chi deviation occurs when internal energy reverses or escapes control, causing the collapse of the dantian, the meridians, and eventually the mind. At the early stage, the core must be stabilized immediately. Foreign energy must be expelled. The reversed flow suppressed. The remaining energy stabilized and guided back into proper circulation. Because controlling another person's internal energy requires precision equal to controlling one's own, success is never guaranteed, not even for someone who has reached transcendence. And in Cheon Muryang's case, the yin energy spread across his meridians also had to be dissolved simultaneously. That evening, Cheon Muryang's red cloud flame chi filled the banquet hall for a long time. The Tang clan departed quietly and in humiliation. As they left, the Tang elders spoke. The eldest young master's condition had been completely different from what they had expected. If Cheon Muryang truly possessed that level of talent, the Cheon clan would never have proposed this marriage. They would never risk inviting the hostility of the Central Plains sections. After a pause, he remarked that it was unfortunate things had ended this way. Tang Sohai walked beside him silently. Then she remembered something. When she first arrived, a dog had suddenly rushed forward barking. The startled maid had spilled food onto her clothes. The memory faded. Tang Sohai quietly left the Cheon clan with the rest of her people. At the same time, inside the estate, Cheon Muryang stood alone in the empty banquet hall. Tables were broken. Chairs had been pushed aside. Candles burned quietly over a place that had recently been full of voices. Now, there was only silence. Cheon Muryang approached and asked whether he was all right. No answer came. After a long silence, Cheon Muryang spoke first. He admitted that he understood the reasoning. No matter how serious Cheon Muryang's condition had been, proposing marriage with the Tang clan had been extreme. Still, he was relieved it had been annulled. But now, they had made a true enemy. The Tang clan would not forget this. Cheon Muryang quietly said he was wrong. Cheon Muryang stopped. Cheon Muryang explained that he had never brought in the Tang clan because of Cheon Muryang's illness. Cheon Muryang asked why. Cheon Muryang answered, without borrowing the Tang clan's influence, he would not have been able to protect Muryang. Protect? Cheon Muryang quietly repeated the word. Cheon Muryang called his name and asked if he had noticed something. He could no longer remember how many years had passed since Cheon Muryang had last looked directly into his eyes. And tonight, for the first time, it seemed Cheon Muryang had finally made friends. Cheon Muryang remained silent, genuinely surprised. Cheon Muryang quietly said he was tired and would head inside. He began walking away. Cheon Muryang remained standing alone in the empty hall. Thinking quietly, the clan head had looked strangely at peace. Then, Cheon Muryang stopped. Without turning, he said it had been long enough. Tonight, he wanted a drink. And for the first time in years, he felt like getting drunk. Cheon Muryang smiled faintly and nodded. He walked beside Cheon Muryang and said it sounded good to him as well. The two left together. Outside, the trainees moved through the night in groups, still unable to process everything they had witnessed. They talked excitedly among themselves. What they had experienced felt unreal. Their names and what they had accomplished would be remembered. Starting today, they believed they had become legends. Morning arrived quickly. Thunder, the stray dog that had claimed the Cheon clan estate as his territory, received his usual meal from one of the maids. He ate noisily. The sound carried through the walls of the medical pavilion. A pair of eyes slowly opened. Wolyang sat up and looked around. The ceiling above her was unfamiliar. She did not understand where she was or why. Another maid noticed immediately. She screamed, not in fear, but relief. Her voice trembled as she told Wolyang she had finally awakened. She had been unconscious for days. Wolyang quietly asked what happened. The maid explained. She had nearly died from Tang clan poison. If the young master had not risked his life in a duel to obtain the antidote, she would not have survived. Wolyang stared silently. She asked what she meant. Risked his life? The maid realized she had said too much. She tried to stop, but Wolyang insisted. So she explained everything. After the duel with the Tang clan escort warrior, Cheon Muryang collapsed. Blood poured from his nose. He had entered chi deviation. Cheon Muryang barely managed to save him. Then, the rest followed. To save Wolyang, Cheon Muryang had forced the annulment of the engagement with Tang Sohai. And because of that, the Cheon clan and Tang clan had become enemies. Wolyang immediately got out of bed and ran. The maid's words echoed behind her. How could someone as insignificant as herself become the cause of something so enormous? She had no answer. She ran straight toward Cheon Muryang's room. Calling his name, she stopped. Cheon Muryang was sitting beside the bed. Wolyang froze in the doorway. She could not understand why he was there.
Seon-hak called Wolyung's name. She immediately bowed, her thoughts turning against her as she blamed herself for the failed marriage and believed he had come to hold her responsible. Instead, Seon-hak told her the situation had worked out well. Since Cheon Muryang showed no sign of waking soon, he was leaving him in her care. He looked at Cheon Muryang for a moment before rising from his chair and heading for the door. Wolyung quickly stepped aside to let him pass. Before leaving, Seon-hak stopped and placed something in her hand. Looking down, she saw it was a pass to the Heavenly Dragon Library. She immediately refused, saying she could not accept something so valuable because she was only Wolyung. Seon-hak asked who had ever said she was only Wolyung. He reminded her that Cheon Muryang had declared before everyone in the hall that she belonged to him. As far as he knew, she was the only person Cheon Muryang had, so she should stop belittling herself. He also assured her that Cheon Muryang would wake up soon and told her not to worry. After Seon-hak left, Wolyung remained alone beside Cheon Muryang. She quietly reflected on his words, especially that she was the young master's only person. She had always served as Cheon Muryang's personal attendant. Sometime later, Cheon Muryang's body suddenly began to tremble, and sweat covered his face. His consciousness returned to the rain. He stood before the Cheon clan estate as flames engulfed everything around him. Clan members were being cut down where they stood. A scream echoed behind him, and he turned to see an unknown warrior charging straight at him. He reached for his sword but found nothing at his side, leaving him with no choice but to confront the attacker barehanded. Cheon Muryang's fist passed straight through the attacker as though he were made of smoke. Without slowing down, the man moved past him and cut down a Cheon clan member behind him. Cheon Muryang stood frozen, trying to understand what he was witnessing. Looking back, he realized the warrior had never been targeting him. His true target was a body lying on the ground. At that moment, Cheon Muryang recognized the attackers. They were members of the demonic cult. The memory finally fell into place. He was reliving the night the Cheon clan was annihilated, the massacre that began after Cheon Muryang brought the demonic cult into the clan. Even those who had once stood beside him were killed, and countless others lost their lives as well. Cheon Muryang questioned whether any of it made sense. The Cheon clan was one of the 10 great families. No matter how reckless or foolish a single person had been, a clan of that stature should never have fallen so easily to the demonic cult. There had to be more to that night than he knew. He then noticed Seon-hak standing nearby. One of the few people in the clan who had ever shown him genuine kindness, Seon-hak had never raised a weapon in his life, yet even he had been killed. The sound of clashing steel suddenly echoed from beyond the hall. It was the very moment of betrayal. Cheon Muryang recognized the voice immediately and rushed through the courtyard, arriving just in time to witness it. Cheon Muryang's head was severed in a single swing by the giant ancient warrior's blade. It flew from his shoulders, struck the stone ground, and rolled to a stop at Cheon Muryang's feet. He stared at it, thinking it was a miserable end for the clan's first son. Then he realized his own death had been no different, stabbed from every direction like an animal. The anger rising within him was beyond his control, and it forced his eyes open. Cheon Muryang found himself staring at the face of the overweight Cheon Muryang. He demanded to know what had frightened him so badly that he had driven a blade into the back of the one person who had given everything for him. Questioned why he had brought the demonic cult into the Cheon clan. Now, seeing him in such a miserable state, Cheon Muryang felt it was no more than he deserved. His voice grew quiet as he asked for just one answer. He only wanted Cheon Muryang to answer him. Unable to hold back his emotions any longer, he was interrupted by another voice. It declared that if the family had been foolish enough to make an incompetent wretch like him the family head, then he should have simply obeyed and followed orders.